Welcome to the FATED Connections Path of Exile Community Podcast, episode number 109. We're almost an entire month into the beautiful Crucible League, more or less Crucible, beautiful. I think there's a ton of opinions about this league, but we're all still playing, so it's a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to discuss our opinions with today's guests. But first, of course, let's welcome the co-host Balor Mage. How have you been doing?
Hello. I've been doing pretty good. Solo self-found or group self-found is reinvigorating. I'm again excited to play like it was league start. So
You're actually heisting, I hear.
oh yeah, heisting, expeditioning. I'm gonna do blighted maps, all sorts of things that I normally avoid.
Great stuff. And then, of course, with us, we have someone we have seen here before, a fellow PoE enjoyer who's been making rounds in other gaming communities as well. Let's say hi to Tanky. How have you been?
I've been good. Thanks for having me again.
Glad to have you on. You've been going hard on PoE this league?
Yes, very much so. And I had some personal goals, ended up hitting them, made a lot of content, a new video series that I think a lot of people have been enjoying, the weekly meta reports. I plan to do them for the first month of every league. And yeah, it's been pretty darn good.
It's good to hear. And then last but certainly not least, let's get in our final guest, a first-time appearance from Snoo-Bay85. Welcome, sir. How are you doing?
Hey there. How you doing? Pleasure to be here.
Glad to have you on. Do you want to give us a little bit of a introduction since we haven't seen you around?
The long-winded? You want the long-winded one or the short one? Probably the short one, right?
We can start with the short one and then we poke at it until you give us the long one.
Poke at it, yeah. I started playing Path of Exile 2.5 years ago, and I am a Diablo franchise loyalist, you could say. I've played it since I was too young to play the game. I was playing the game, and I don't know. Long story short, I'm the kind of person who takes video games pretty seriously. I definitely one of those people who likes to min-max the fun out of the game. If you've heard that idea put on different people. So my style, the way I play doesn't really jive with everyone, but there's a certain segment of the player base that I'm delighted to discover actually exists, and it's much bigger than I expected. There's a lot of people out there who play the game like I do, and I make a lot of content for those people as well as all people. I try to dip my toes in all the different ponds a little bit, but it seems that I've kind of solidified my place as somebody who is a little more on the serious side of playing the game. Yeah.
Some people say min-max with fun out of a game. Others say min-max with fun into the game.
Well, I'm definitely having fun doing it, so maybe that's right. Yeah.
Sounds good. When did you start playing? Sorry if you mentioned that already and I missed it. I was
2.5 years ago.
What was your first league? I mean,
let's see. It was first week of Ultimatum League. Okay. So I, of course, like everyone else, I had attempted to start the game like 3 or 4 times. Looked at the game, and then you download the game, and then it gets 50% download, and you're like, nah, screw this. I'm just gonna go back to whatever game I was playing. And then second time around, I download the whole game and like launch it up, and I'm looking at different YouTube videos, and I'm like, no, this is too much. I'm just gonna go back to doing my own thing. And then third or fourth time around, I finally, logged into the beach and actually killed Hillock and discovered all the wonder of gems linking and support gems, and yeah, it was all uphill from there. I think, not downhill.
Always a few false starts with this game.
I guess
I'll tell you this though. I started again first week of Ultimatum, and I finished the league with around 900 Exalted Orbs. I remember I made it kind of my mission. Somewhere around halfway through the league, I decided, this whole making currency thing is kind of fun. I want to see how much I can make this league. I didn't even know what a Mirror of Calandra was. I didn't know what to spend the stuff on, but that's just what I did. The very first league I played, I just made as much as I could. And of course, I improved pretty dramatically the following few leagues. But yeah, that's about it.
Sounds about right. Uh, I guess we'll go right in our league experiences. There is probably a podcast episode somewhere in the past where Tenki made his first appearance, and where we can hear when Tenki started playing this game. Unless you want to give us a quick catch up,
Quick catch
or
up.
like give
Sure.
the people a quick catch up.
I started playing shortly after Diablo 3 came out, which was back before there was even such a thing as a league, before you could really find information on the game. And back when one of the best PoE guide writers happened to be named Neversink. I've played on and off ever since.
That is quite a while ago.
Yep. I believe it was patch 0.11.
Ooh.
It was basically right after the closed beta ended and the open beta started.
You're definitely the most old timer of us all here.
Back in my day, we used chaos orbs on items, and we're happy about it.
Right.
At least we had chaos orbs.
I still do that now.
Yeah, so the reason I asked these silly questions in the beginning for the introduction is obviously we need a solid foundation to be able to tell or to put into context the opinions that we're going to exchange about the current state of the game and about our experiences in the Crucible. Because I think it's kind of important to know where the speaker comes from to some degree at least. And yeah, I guess I'll just throw in my hat into the ring, so to say, and say that I started in Torment Bloodlines end of 2014, and then directly, came into the Act 4 release, and all that happened to unfold afterwards. I believe, Balor, you started around the same time, right?
Exactly the same league, and exclusively in hardcore for the first like 10,000 hours I played. 10 to 12-ish thousand, somewhere around there.
It's a magic draw towards hardcore back then.
No one played softcore back then at all. It was like 4% or something softcore. This was a hardcore only game.
I was part of a 4% back then.
What a scrub.
But here's the thing. In softcore, you could craft with eternal orbs.
True. In hardcore, you could die before you get to maps 6 times in a row. That was
go
my
to Ruthless to do it again now.
Pass.
Yeah. Well, what builds did you guys start with in Crucible? What did take you how far? Let's go. Tanky, go first. I see Snoob just muted his microphone. I was gonna say Snoob, but let's go. Tanky, give us
started Righteous Fire Jug. Because I expected the Crucible mobs to be overtuned. They were, and it wasn't a problem since my build was made to tank pretty much everything. As for how far I took it all the way to, let's just call it egregious levels of min-max, where it could do uber bosses, had about 10 mil DPS, could tank most things, everything that you'd want to build, and a bunch of stuff that you absolutely don't need that's super expensive and really fun, because I like putting the puzzle pieces together. By puzzle pieces, I mean builds.
So it's quite uncommon to play Righteous Fire Jug in softcore, right? Or is that something a lot of people start in softcore? I guess
Absolutely.
Pox really popularized it.
Right now, it was the most popular starter.
I think a lot of people just want to start Righteous Fire. And the fact that it's a jug is just because Pox, right? Pox says what is the best Righteous Fire right now and is generally correct. And whatever's the best, that's the version of Righteous Fire people play, because it's been popular for a while. Like Inquisitor was the best Righteous Fire build for a while. And when that was it, Righteous Firing Inquisitor was the
I wish
the
it'd
one
go
everyone
back to
started with.
Inquisitor so my Aegis Auroras were actually worth something again.
They'd have to remove Fourth Vow.
Yeah.
True. I like the Inquisitor better anyway.
I like the Inquisitor better for certain things, but on Uber bosses, being able to ignore half their penetration and about half their damage is just way too strong.
Actually, the one I like the most, I don't know if anyone's seen it. Is it Captain Lance doing a Righteous Fire ES thing?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that looks great, and I want to play it. I don't know if it's like actually, but I just like the idea of having like 30,000 energy shield. That looks fun.
Never played an energy shield build here, so I don't even know how it works.
Oh, wow. Yeah. At the moment, there's not that big incentive, right? Like, but there was a
Around
while
to it.
where all the top end game builds were blue life.
Mm-hmm.
What did you start with, Snoopy?
Well, I started with the most controversial league starter ever created, Poison Tornado Shot, with
How do you-
magic finding embedded into it as a kind of hybrid, I guess you could say.
Poison TS. Hopefully not as totem on occultist.
Well, it had a self-cast ballista link set up, which is extremely strong with it since the genesis for the build actually came from my experimentation with Soul Thirst a couple leagues back. After creating it was actually my first sort of build guide that I made on my channel. I'm not really known for making build. Maybe I'm becoming known for that a little bit, but more about like strategies, making currency, things like that. But I wanted, again, dipping your toes into different ponds. I wanted to throw my hat into the ring of build creation and advertise what build I was doing, because people were getting interested prior to that what I was doing. So I figured I would take the league start process a little more seriously as far as creating a build and creating a POB and having all the notes and things that people can follow and talking about it and everything, and investing a
makes
few
sense
more
to at least.
hours than normal into that. And by a few, I mean like 100, like 100 hours,
Really?
especially the first time. Yeah. So Soul Thirst Tornado Shot was a build I made back in Sentinel League, and ever since I discovered the wonder of Soul Eater, a deterministic Soul Eater buff, I can't get away from it. I just can't possibly get away from that, especially in the beginning, prior to getting a Headhunter. I mean, it's just the amount of the power spike it gives is just obscene, and the sacrifice may seem kind of big. It's a belt slot, but especially if you can't afford Mage Blood or a Headhunter,
it's the belt
ridiculous
until you get a Headhunter, right? Like it's not.
Yeah. And Soul Thirst has some pretty significant downsides. It pigeonholes you into a lot of different factors you got to put into flasks and everything. So it certainly doesn't come as a total upside. But of course, when I was looking up Soul Eater on the PoE Wiki, there's one other item. There's not very many items. One more is Zerfy's Heart. So I knew right then and there that I wanted to make a league starter around that item. Would probably be chaos oriented. Would probably be Tornado Shot. Maybe not. It just happens to be one of, if not the best, mapping Boyer skill in the game. I think it's even absolute top notch, even early in the early gearing process, if you make an intelligent build around it. Yeah, so that is how I arrived at Poison, because I discovered that Poison as a damage archetype is like the best, basically, in terms of scaling, easy to scale with not too much gear. So the combination of Zerfy's, and it has some synergies with chaos damage and poison, and of course plays a role into that. So Dark Scorn is the bow you would normally use for that, and you just kind of start building it around that whole thing. So, yep.
Nice.
Right. So you're still playing that? Or like, did you switch to another build? Did you have a side project?
I'm not someone who plays a build for like a week or even just 2 weeks and then just moves on to the next thing. I can't really resonate with that. I have to. I don't know. I feel like, what is beating the game as far as Path of Exile? To me, beating the game is min-maxing a build to a certain point where it's just absolutely outrageous, and the amount of investment to get another upgrade is just so ridiculous that you finally reach a point where even somebody like me kind of taps out. And I am reaching that point with that build now. We're about a month into the league, so very soon I'll be coming out with the final showcase on that build, the final iteration. So I've been moving it forward, getting it better. Of course, it has a Headhunter, and it has all kinds of other items that are worth dozens of divines each. And we'll move on to the next thing, which I don't know exactly what it'll be, but I have something up my sleeve. We'll see.
Well, there's certainly tons of options around with the new power spikes that we get from the Crucible.
I have to ask how you started Poison Tornado Shot. Like literally leveled, started wiping.
Oh yeah. I'm glad you asked that
Because that
was,
has to be trash right at the beginning. Like right
that
at the
was a
beginning?
point of contention. Yeah. So this is not the first time poison tornado shot's been tried, and as I understand it, it has some serious downsides to leveling. So that is a major point of concern. But I'm familiar with poisonous concoction, so now poisonous concoction exists as an stupidly strong poison build that happens to use a lot of the same passives on the tree. Not that it really matters. I mean, it doesn't really cost that much to completely revamp a tree, but depends on when you switch, of course. So I recommend it.
You want to do it on day 1 or 2, right?
Yeah.
A lot of regrets then.
Well, I mean, you don't want to do it before regret orbs start feeling like they're not even that amazing anymore. If picking up a regret orb feels like, oh my gosh, yes, I got a regret orb, you don't want to switch. But if it's like, oh yeah, regret orb, okay, another one of those, then revamping the whole tree isn't that big of a deal. But for me, I did poisonous concoction. I recommended to my player base that it was around 85 to 90 before switching, which is a pretty high level for a lot of people, especially thinking about league start. But again, me playing the way I do, that doesn't feel like a very high level to me. I mean, 85 is like day 1.5 or 2 of self-leveling. So, and in the process of completing the Atlas too, or maybe at the tail end of completing the Atlas, not counting Maven invitations and stuff. So it's a very comfortable swap if you wait that long and you get the Darkscorn, the Zerfies, and Ming's Heart was another item. So
I think
worked really well.
You kind of touched on a mistake that I see a lot of players make, which is they start something that's really strong for leveling and they swap off of it way too early before they finished farming up currency.
Yeah,
I've seen that before. A lot.
Farming currency on day 1 and day 2 can be really tricky. That is one of my weaknesses, actually. I'm really good at farming currency. Week 2, week 3, week 4 right now is my strongest point. But a lot of people are really good at this game. But they put all their chips into like the first few days. I still haven't really figured that all out. Finding the niche of like day 1, day 2. I'm talking about things like simulacrum farming in the first 24 hours of the league, that sort of thing. There's apparently some major niches that exist that I've never really tapped into, to be honest.
I mean, my early league money-making niche was buying fractured wands for 2 to 10C each, throwing a few essences of Fearatham, selling them for 2 to 3 divines each, buying essences of horror, getting some elder helmets, and then selling those for 3 to 5 divines each. And that's how I made, I don't know, 30, 40 div early on.
Nice.
Yeah, I noticed that potential when I wanted to make myself so I started animate weapon guardian. I started with physical into a poison, and I noticed when I wanted to make myself a wand upgrade, you could just buy the fractured +1 minion skill gems and throw on a couple essences and then sell for twice the price or something like that. Like ridiculous. I only did it once, right? Like trying to make myself a wand, didn't get the one that I wanted, listed it for like 2 divines when I bought the base for 1. And only had used a couple of essences and then made the next one. And then I used that and I'm still using that. But like in my head, I was like, I could just easily sit here all day and do that and print ones that I could sell for twice the purchase price.
One of the first things I make currency on early is flask crafting. I get to a point where, okay, I'm not satisfied with these nothing flask here. Let's actually craft a proper flask. And typically I go for a specific prefix and a specific suffix, and I want them to both be pretty high tier. And that takes a while to hit. You can't just hit that immediately. So what happens is I craft one, I hit the right prefix, I slam it. If it's totally junk, I'll just craft over it. But if it's something that's pretty good, but not what I want, it's I surprise myself. I list it for something, and then somebody would buy it for like 10 times the value of the craft. And it's not even what I want, and it's just ridiculous. Like flasks, especially in the first few days. The one that comes to mind is the prefix. Let's see, if I buy like a level 80, even like a medium tier flask, and I get like 2 flask charges gained every time you're hit by an enemy, or something like that.
Yeah, flagellants.
I don't want that flask. That's not what I want. But a lot of people do. A lot of people pay an arm and a leg for that prefix.
Rolls up.
If I get like a really good suffix, if I get like a really good suffix, and like for example, tier 2 curse, reduced effect of curses on you, combined with that prefix, that flask is going to sell for sure.
Another one that sells really well is any elemental flask with T1 Elires as a suffix and Alchemist's prefix for increased effect.
Huh. I think I roll over those when I roll flasks normally.
You should definitely not be rolling over those, because with a perfect roll, I sold one yesterday for 2 divines, and early league they're like
Jesus.
100 chaos.
Yeah,
Mage
all
Blood
right.
Wearers and Pathfinders.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, I complain a lot about how much friction is in these systems, like now that they've inflated the mod pools on specifically flasks now, but like in general, every item, like if you want to craft a good item, you're looking at potentially clicking thousands of alterations onto it in order to get something that you want to progress on, and then you're not guaranteed that you actually hit it, and you may have to start all over again eventually. And then, yeah, I don't know. I complain a lot about the friction that is included in alt spamming, but it's nice to see that, you know, the flip side, the positive side of the medallion is that there's a lot of money in it for people who want to earn currency early on.
Here's a good example of another one. I made a shield with fractured increased damage. I think it was lightning or something. Alt spammed for 2% all res. And I must have exalt annulled it 7 times. The 2% all max res survived every single one. Filled the suffixes, used a wild bristle matron to augment lightning. As long as you're matching the damage type, it's the only prefix for anything non-fizz. I now had a +1 100% increased damage shield with 2% max all res. Relatively little effort, and if you don't miss any of your exalts or annulls, or you just don't care that much about your suffixes, it's pretty darn deterministic.
So we've been talking about like making currency early, and no one has mentioned the league mechanic at all. Is that a coincidence?
No.
I did make a lot off of the league mechanic early, but not through particularly repeatable means, because I had made the wands I mentioned. They were minion wands with +1 fire fracture rolled with Essence of Fear. So perfect for RF, basically. And then I would crangle them together with things like dot multi, and so many people bought those. It was a huge value add to just throw on fire dot multi, or even throw on just minion damage.
Yeah, I explored the mechanic enough at this point to realize that it definitely had some potential. It's certainly reminiscent of Recombinator tech, you know, combining an item, and then, you know, you have an item that not really going to use, but it is a great prep item for just being destroyed into another one, combined potentially if your tree matches up with that. And for those who understood it really well, they knew what kind of items were valuable. If it had like 2 highly desirable mods in one section of the tree, and they had the other, you know, 2 or 3 highly desirable mods, they might pay an arm and a leg just for the chance at slamming it together. I did at some point, because I crafted a bow eventually, and got pretty lucky. I got 5 mods that I wanted on it. So, but I never touched the league mechanic in the first day, except maybe in the first half of Act 1, just to verify that tabula rasa doesn't drop. And after that, I know better than to touch it, even if it's highly lucrative, even if it was ultimatum. Probably, I don't really think it would be worth touching, at least for the first day or so, because it's just going to slow you down. You know, maybe if we were playing Ruthless and you needed the help to level, but we don't really need the help, you know, to get through the campaign.
I used it constantly the whole time. And I have
Why
to
did
say,
you
it
do
did
that?
nothing but slow me down. I made 0. I made
Why
no
did you
good
do that?
items.
You know better
And,
than that. Why would you do
Yeah,
that?
I do. I wanted it to be good. I was surviving on hopium. I was
Yeah.
just telling myself that it was worth doing the whole time.
Surely we must be missing something. We're not seeing the whole picture yet.
You're
Yeah.
missing the core game, I think. As somebody who's only played it 2.5 years, I still get a great deal of enjoyment out of the core game. I could care less what the league mechanic is. I don't look forward to the league mechanic even in the slightest. I look forward to the fresh new economy, That's all I care about when it comes to a new league, the new economy, a fresh start, when things are exciting and the price points of various different things. There's all kinds of different ways you can make currency, again, which I'm not very good at actually on the first couple of days. So it's exciting for somebody who doesn't know exactly what they're going to do and the best thing to do. And it's just all kind of chaos in the economy, and things start to even out. And as things temper down, I like to tap into the league mechanic 5, 6, 7 days after the league.
That long.
My normal league start money making strat is to be flat broke for about 5 days. Generally, I pick the most meta league start that I want to play, and I invest every single bit of currency I can possibly pull into that build exclusively. And I finish all of my chore work in the first 5 days, do all the bosses, all the stones, all the completions, all the everything. And then on day 5, I sell the build as one of the best geared versions of that thing that exists because I've pumped every single bit of currency into it. And then I'm usually looking at, I don't know, 100 or 100 or
How do you
200
sell the
divines to
build? I'm
reroll.
curious. I bet a lot of people would wonder about that. How does one actually just sell a build?
Basically, I price the entire thing up, every single item, every single gem, every single everything, fill it all out in the notes, and then I sell the entire build on TFT to somebody. So I just go onto the TFT server and put the whole build
I've
in
done
there
that
and,
once. I've done
and
that
go,
once.
here you
last
go.
night.
And so what I do is I just keep playing it. I put it up when I'm ready to be done,
Yeah.
and then I keep playing it.
Anybody
to keep
else ever
making
do that
currency.
before? Any of you
What's
other
that?
guys do that?
I don't sell my builds now.
I don't sell my
Sorry.
builds because I like having them to use for content creation.
So my idea
What
of
if
my
you've
league
already
start
used-
build is it's a chore. My league start build is a chore to get all the chores done so that I can start doing my juice maps. And so I build the league start and then gear it, get rid of it, and then use the however much divines I've got to make a character I want to play.
So I like having a lot of them on standard so that later I can use them if I need to revamp something, and then I have a fully functional version of, like right now, if I wanted to have a fully functional version of a cast on crit Forbidden Right, I have my character from Sentinel that at the time I probably put 2-3 mirrors into, that fixing the tree a little bit, maybe swapping a couple items, fully functional. I can be like, this works. This is, the parameters of the defenses that still function. This part isn't so good anymore. All that right at my fingertips.
For me, it's
That
less
makes
practical
sense.
considerations. For me, it's more like having your old diaries, or I also do hobby on a hobby scale. I do some
You're gonna
music
put a
production.
picture frame on the wall of your build.
No, it's more like even after like 10, 20 years going back into the project, opening it up, and some things won't work because certain plugins you don't have installed anymore, and they're not compatible with your operating system anymore for whatever reason. But it's just nice to go in there and to look the way that you structured things back then, and just get back into the mindset that you had when you made it. It's like like a diary in some way. It's weird. I mean, obviously, it's nice to have some characters on standard to play around with for content creation, to record certain video footage, but that's not what I do it for. I'm just
Last league we had a build enabling legacy item, Original Sin, and I do actually feel that way about the Original Sin build that I made. I look back on that thinking I'll never be able to do that again.
I'm so sad
It's
we
pretty
don't
cool,
have
and
that.
I still have that build, in standard and fully functional. So
want
that's
it.
kind of the only build that I feel that way about, though.
Yeah, for me, there are so many builds that will never exist again that at this point, I just expect it. Something else about keeping builds, though, if I sold off my build, I don't even know what I'd do with the currency. I'd have so much of it. I don't know. I genuinely don't know what I'd do with it.
That's potentially the problem. That's why I've re-rolled in Solo Self-Found. Because I made a 100 divine sale and was just like, this is really annoying. And then I was like, wait, hang on, that's not the response that you should be this should be making me happy.
I remember seeing
maybe I need to leave trade.
Yeah. Valor, I was really intrigued by that when you made that swap, because I know you and I are kind of on the same wavelength as far as trade league, making currency, magic finding, things like that.
Oh yeah.
I couldn't really grapple with what would have made you decide to do that, or what would have resulted in that feeling. I don't know if it's just because you played the game way longer than I did and you got weary of just the core game, or what. But
I think, I don't know. It's the first time I've made a big sale, like a 100+ divine sale, and been annoyed by it. Like actively annoyed that I had to leave my map, and then inconvenienced by putting away 10 stacks of divines. It didn't give me dopamine, and it's the first time that hasn't happened. Because realistically, all we're all chasing is dopamine hits, right? Like that's it. That's the whole thing. How we all get it is different. How much it requires is different. But we're all just chasing dopamine. That's the entire game. And this is the first time that like a big sale like that didn't give me dopamine. And I was like, well, I just, this doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter. It
What
does
was
nothing
the
to me.
sale? Your
What was
build?
that?
Your build?
No,
was
no,
the
just a
sale?
wand.
Oh, crafted or found? Or
Yeah, no, crafted wand.
just crafted, yeah. Okay.
Probably
It's just
Crucible Tree.
It was just a fizz wand that we made.
Hmm.
And I was just like, well, if this isn't making me happy, and the last apothecary that dropped on the ground also didn't make me happy, what am I doing in trade? And so I moved to solo self-found. I don't know if I'll live here forever. I'll probably be back in trade. I'm too addicted to MFing.
Do you
love it.
anticipate finding an apothecary solo self-found and that making you happier?
Well, I was happier when I unveiled a 400% totem explode node on its own with nothing else on a white base bow. That gave me more dopamine than the 100 divine trade. Because I've been looking for it for a day and a half. And I didn't have it yet. And I was stuck not playing Totem Explode when I wanted to play Totem Explode in the solo self-found environment. And I couldn't do it. And eventually I got the basic 400% version. And that gave me more dopamine than the 100 divine sale. And it's been like that ever since. I got a 600 yesterday. That was huge. And I got my crafted done on it properly and was really excited about that. A lightning coil dropped on the floor and that gave me excitement. So yeah, I guess I'm getting more excitement off far less rare things.
But I know you don't like Ruthless.
Or
No.
does he? Or does he?
No.
Maybe he's closet Ruthless enjoyer.
Ruthless isn't hard. Ruthless is tedium. I'm not.
I actually like
No.
Ruthless.
You're
If I
muted,
could,
Cat
if I
Master.
could design, if I could design, if I have my PoE utopian, if I could control everybody with strings on my hands and say you're going to enjoy this mode of gameplay, I would send everybody Ruthless and I would have a blast over there.
Huh.
We'd have a great economy. I mean, just be so many people over there, and everything you find would be worth something, and it would just be wonderful. But
See,
that's
if
not
there
the
were
world we
Valor,
live
you
in.
said ruthless isn't hard, but it's just tedious. But what is SSF?
I mean, less.
I don't really see it
tedium?
as tedious. It's not really to me. It's more challenging and more time consuming, and that is tedious to some people. But to me, it's more of the delayed gratification, I guess you could say.
Tedious
Delayed
has such a
gratification is more
negative
powerful.
connotation, but if we're talking about the element of tedium in the game, then that's not necessarily something negative.
Well, tedium is a
will-
continuum. You know, for some people, tedium is not moving 500% increased movement speed. If you're not
I'll tell
moving that
you-
fast, it's tedious. It's just
tell
a
you one
continuum
thing.
for people.
If there was going to be suddenly 150,000 people playing Ruthless Softcore Trade League, I would probably be pretty interested in playing it.
Same.
But I'm not interested in playing Ruthless in any form of solo self-found environment or with the current trade size of about 12 players that they have now. That doesn't
guess-
entertain me.
Easy clap. We just like throw our communities together. We all start Ruthless Softcore Trade
I know,
next league.
just-
Let's go.
If
Start
there
the
was
master
going to
plan right
be
now.
yeah, if there was going to be 150,000 people playing it, I would suddenly be interested, and I think a lot more people would if the size was that big, but it's not. And
Well, we are going to be playing Ruthless when Path of Exile 2 comes out. That's the rumor.
oh, don't say that.
There will be 150,000 people playing it then.
But what will Ruthless be? If PoE 2 is Ruthless, what will PoE 2 Ruthless be?
I guess they'll make Ruthless Sir. I don't know.
No gems, just hand
No,
combat.
no stash. They'll do no
Ruthless.
stash for it.
Ruthless will be Lake of Calandra League.
You'll have to put you'll have to keep your charms in your inventory. You can't pick up things.
Which That reminds me of something else. This is
Delete
probably
mechanic.
uh,
Sorry.
no. So another topic that is probably going to make two people in the call very angry when I say this, but I feel like Magic Find as a mechanic in ARPGs is out of date, and there goes one, and needs some sort of
I'm
modernization.
still here.
And generating more currency is fun for the people who are generating it, but it has a weird impact on the entire rest of the economy. And I almost feel like Magic Find should be Loot Find, where you're finding some sort of better items that force other people to interact with the economy. Maybe item rarity now has tier 0 crafting mods that drop only. They only happen if you have rarity thresholds. But if no one crafts on a base, it's not very impactful or valuable.
Okay,
Take it away, Balor.
here's my problem. At certain points, at a lot of points in the history of PoE, Magic Find has not been the best way to get currency, and you shouldn't have done it. Because there were plenty of points in PoE's history, including one of my favorite leagues ever, which was Delirium, in which juicing your map content to a difficulty level that Magic Find could never ever have run anyway was rewarding in its own. So juicing my content to be so difficult that you could never possibly run a magic character in it because you need a real strong character to be able to do it was more rewarding than Magic Finding lower level content, which it should have been. Over the course of the last 2 years, they've removed somewhere between 7 to 10 of the top layers of mapping difficulty. They're all gone and they never got replaced with anything. There is no difficult content to do. And if you do juice your content to the point where it is really difficult, you get less rewards than you would going back to the moderately medium level of juice that Magic Find can still do. You actually get less for juicing more because killing monsters doesn't make you loot anymore. So they've forced the people who want to make lots of stuff drop on the floor while mapping. That's the goal, right? It's not really, I don't really care about how much Quanto rarity is on my gear. I care about how much loot I can get to drop on the floor, right? Like that's what I want. That's where the excitement comes from. Make stuff drop on the floor. And there was times when I used to do that by having the strongest character I possibly could, engaging in the hardest content I could possibly make. But after repetitively removing the top level of hard mapping content, there is no difficulty to go to. And if you juice past a certain level, you get less loot, not more anyway. So the only way to get more to drop on the floor is to go with quantity rarity. So I would be fine with the idea of quantity rarity disappearing entirely if we suddenly also got all the levels of juice and all the loot rewards that came with them that we had 2 years ago back again.
So my problem's more with quantity than rarity here. And certain times where those levels of juice you mentioned also very unhealthy on the quant side. Nemesis 4 being a good example that never should have existed in the game. I'm very glad Nem 4 is gone. And when a disproportionate amount of the items generated come from a minority of the players, it feels a little bit weird. And I would rather see item quality be increased rather than item quantity be increased, which is what I feel is outdated about a lot of Magic Find systems that kind of stemmed from Diablo 2.
Yeah, I agree with some part of what both of you said. This is a topic I do actually have a lot of opinions on this topic. I've mentioned in a previous couple of leagues, I think one of the best league mechanics that they could possibly come out with is one that takes the concept of the Templar gloves, you repeatedly val it and corrupt it. Do that for maps. Why can't we have 15 modded maps? Why can't we have 30 modded maps? Imagine how insane that would be.
We did in Scourge.
Kind of, yeah. So that is a little bit like that, but I'm just imagining a world where you have an infinite stacking number of modded, and that would create some seriously aspirational content, especially if you combine that with Wandering Path or something. And I don't know, I guess, Magic Find on gear would still be a thing for that, but it would be pretty dang hard to run an outrageously high, a 20 modded rare corrupt map on a Magic Find character. That would be quite a feat.
I mean, everyone here, but especially Snoo, will be very familiar with exactly how much weaker our characters get in order to put on all of that stuff. Like, the content we end up running does make it look like it's still really powerful, but it's usually because we've balanced the level of content we're doing with the exact amount of power we've stripped down to, because we're losing power everywhere to put on Quantum Magic Find. If
Well, I
you
think
just
that's what
made more
makes-
difficult content more rewarding to a point where I had to put power back into my character to be able to do it again, I'd suddenly be wearing way less quant.
Right. Well, this is kind of where you and I kind of disagree, I think, a little bit on what constitutes. How should I say this? The degree by which you have to scale down your player power or scale down the map difficulty to justify putting on the Magic Find gear. That's part of what makes my content special, I guess, is that I kind of took a somewhat fresh take on magic finding by blending player power and magic finding. I never make a character that's a weird thing. Like if you go back and you look at all the magic finding guides that have existed, the meta was that you basically take every single possible magic find piece of gear you can, and you need like if you had anything less than 100% increased quantity on gear, you were a loser. That's not a real magic find character, right? And I never got into that. Now maybe it's because I started late and I was, I didn't have this meta solidified in my head. And as I saw the game getting harder, remember, Expedition League was my second league. That was my first league that I league started, Expedition League. And that's a league many people hate because it got way harder. I didn't see it that way. I mean, it was just my second league. And most people can understand that if you're new at the game and you started in Expedition League, I mean, you don't have anything to you're not thinking about Harvest League or Ritual League and all the power that contained. That's not your frame of reference, right? So I immediately went to thinking, at that time we were doing Nemesis 3 and Nemesis 4 and juicing up maps with Beyond and everything. And I was trying to figure out, okay, well, how much Magic Find gear can I put on where I can still just blast through this map and I almost never die? How far can I take that? And I always find somewhere in between where I like it. A good example of today's meta is gloves like Sadima's gloves, a 10% increased quant, but people have begun warming up to the idea of Calm Spirit and getting Rage and getting Berserk into the build. And it's taken people a long time to understand that, you're probably going to be a lot more efficient and find more items if you sacrifice 10% quant to get Berserk into your build. That's probably a worthy trade. And if you go on to PoE Ninja and you look at all the builds, still not all that many builds that are doing that. And as content creators begin promoting that kind of gearing strategy and making a build that's more well-rounded, that can still efficiently clear with Magic Find on and even take on Delirium content, stuff like that, I think we'll begin seeing a turnaround.
Which is
and maybe
totally valid.
people
but
warm
the
up to the
opposite of
idea of
what I
Magic
do.
Find.
I will just spend an extra 500 divines on the few pieces that aren't Magic Find to make sure that I can do the content with 100% of the Magic Find gear on.
Yeah.
I
But
think
even then,
in the
Headhunter
case-
is not that great.
Yeah. I think in the case of something like Calm Spirit, though, because you get Berserk from the Rage, it might be better to give up the quant and clear the map faster.
I guess these days you have to be pretty cautious about how you tailor a strategy. If you're going to go for just blasting maps being really clear, you can make a lot of currency that way these days. I mean, there's altar farming, there's expedition and harvest, which is entirely dependent on pack size and the quantity on maps. Doesn't have anything to do with your gear, as far as I know. There's Harbinger. Most league specific rewards basically do not depend on your Magic Find stats on gear. So you can farm all kinds of league mechanics and get all kinds of currency through those, and you don't need a single piece of Magic Find gear. But you can, of course, blend the two together. You can try to, I like putting Delirium on my maps where I can. I know that has some good ramifications for just raw drops. I try to farm league mechanics at the same time as juicing up the map and try to, again, I guess that's my strategy, is kind of blending all of it together and making something work with that.
Which is probably more fun in general than the way I do it. It might be something I need to adjust to have more fun, because I'm used to just going 100%. I want everything. Absolutely every bit of quant. And maybe it'd be a little more fun if I'm like, why don't I take 70% of the quant and then swap out some of these pieces for some more power and speed.
Well, how did you arrive to the justification to dropping Bisco's leash for Headhunter? You must have thought something in your head was saying, yeah, I think this is a worthy trade-off. You just have to apply that same principle to some other items.
The answer to that is defense, right?
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, actually, a year ago it was everything, but
yeah.
Nowadays it's defense. Yeah.
Nowadays it's just offensively, Headhunter's trash, but it does keep me alive.
Yeah.
And it's the difference between being able to run like Alk and Go maps or like medium juice, or being able to run suddenly 60% delirious 8 mod corrupted maps.
What about you, Catmaster? Are you magic finding anything?
It's not really my topic at all. I don't really do a lot of quant. I do remember, like, back in the day, like Bestiary League or something like that. I think I had like a dual wield obliteration, low life occultist with shavs that was like fitting in a little bit of quant. I think I had a white socket pariah or whatever the ring was called that gives quant on the white socket. Yeah, I was trying to get some doctors and burial chambers and all that, but never been much of an MF head myself. But I do realize that it's a very controversial topic. Some people have very strong feelings against or for MF, and I'm not quite sure where I stand. I definitely see positive aspects and I see negative aspects. I think it's very characteristic for a game like Path of Exile to just have another axis where you can like spec into an axis that is not like the survivability of your character, not the damage, not the mobility, not the attack, cast, move speed. Because, you know, Path of Exile is a game about decision making. Like, what would be the smartest thing to do with the next investment that I get? So, like, if you already have 100% increased damage, then the next 10% increase is not a 10% more anymore, but it's only a 5% more because you already have a pile of 200 that you're putting it on, right? So it would be smarter to get that investment into attack speed and vice versa. And if at a certain point you're scaling your character to the point that in the content that you want to run with it, you're no longer getting an increase in clear speed and loot per time by making your character stronger offensively, then there is this other axis that you can invest into, which is the increased quantity and rarity that allows you to generate more income per time. And I think that's fascinating. It's just, yeah, that becomes difficult to balance, I guess, at points, which is why they dial it back so hard. I mean, which is why they dialed it back to the point that MP and his 5-man group don't find it's worth to do the group-based MFing for League Start anymore, but they actually...
That wasn't dialed back. That version's been deleted. That's not dialed back, it's gone.
Might be a controversial opinion, but I think overall it was for the best that it was. I definitely hope that at some point they add different avenues to min-max in that way for party play, but that's specifically not very healthy for the game because it devalued so many items that are supposed to be rare. Things that...
Go ahead.
I also have the same issue with divination cards. That think of how much more exciting Headhunter was when you couldn't get it via cards. It had to drop on the ground. Even if by the end of
I agree.
The same number of Headhunters, let's pretend, same number of total Headhunters, but they only dropped on the ground now. That is a way more exciting item all of a sudden.
As much as I love farming divination cards, I agree for items like that. I remember finding a raw Mage Blood in Arch Nemesis League. There was no Apothecary card yet. That was exciting. That was really exciting. And then we go into Sentinel League, and it's like, well, here it is, the Crimson Prison. We're stuck here because what else should we even do? You know, it's just way too valuable.
We could do Defiled Cathedral.
It's not as good of a map. Hot take.
Here's the problem with Defiled Cathedral is it's got too varied of a layout and a shit boss. Crimson is exactly the same. I know where I'm going every time.
I rush the boss.
Yeah.
I kind of a middle of the road opinion on I guess this magic finding thing that Tenki was talking about. He thinks it was good that they removed the ultra high end juicing stuff, the Beyond Abyss, Alva, the 3 big ones, I think, and that combination of those things. my take on this is I don't really care a whole lot about where Magic Find is taken as far as like what is the best strategy. The fact of the matter is there will be a best, and this comes from the min-max max mindset. Min-maxing doesn't go away if they remove Alva, if they remove Abyss and beyond. It's not like those forms of play that making currency goes away. Nemesis 4 went away. Okay, I went back to the drawing board. Okay, what are we going to do next league? Because it's obviously not going to be Nemesis 3, even though that was clearly the best way to make currency for solo players anyway, with the currency only dropping for solo players. But for me, that's why I mentioned I actually like the idea of playing Ruthless. Okay, obviously I'm going to find way less stuff on the ground, way less currency, but it's all relative. It's all relative to what everyone else is finding, where the economy is at anyway. If the economy goes dry because everybody's finding less loot, all the loot's more meaningful, and I'm still going to have just as much fun.
So
I mean, that's where I stand on it.
I agree.
Unfortunately, this is the part where I get hated a lot, because the thing that the big juicer groups were doing, two things about that. One, it was never the best way for a group of people to make money anyway. It absolutely wasn't. It wasn't even close.
Okay, so I just want to clarify one thing, if you don't mind.
Mhm.
I'm not really talking about whether or not this was the best way for someone to make money. I was talking about item generation.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'll get to that. That's part.
Yeah.
That's the
Like
second
server
part.
stress and stuff like that.
Server
Yeah.
stress, economic stress, etc.
I mean,
Exactly.
Yeah, that's obviously a good side effect of them removing it.
Like the first step is that was never the reason they were rich. In fact, those groups are less rich because they decide to do that sort of thing together. It's still a lot of money they make, but it isn't the best. They are sacrificing profits so that they can have fun with friends. So they didn't remove the rich people, and they didn't remove the amount of currency generation. They removed a way for a particular group of people that is much larger than just that one group to actually enjoy playing the game together. They didn't replace it with anything. There's no alternative. They're done. That type of group content is done now. There is nothing for them to do. I think that is just a net loss to fun because it didn't get replaced with anything. The second thing is, I actually think that sort of item generation is incredibly good for the economy. It has a really big trickle-down effect that helped a lot of people afford things they couldn't afford. It made those groups buy things that dropped commonly for other people for much more inflated prices, giving them currency in their pocket, and made a lot of things that they couldn't afford to buy in the past far more affordable, leading to more fun for casual people as well. So I actually think they had a net positive effect on the economy that was good, that got taken away, and their fun got taken away and was replaced with nothing. I think it was a loss across the board.
Valor, I've heard you make that argument numerous times, and I don't have a solid argument against it. I've given that a lot of thought. The whole idea of the trickle down economy, and how if there's way more stuff being generated at the top, yeah, the rich get richer, but the poor get richer too, basically, because they're able to gear themselves up more quickly and efficiently than otherwise would. And I do not have a solid argument against why that's a bad thing, at least in the context of somebody who just wants to play the game just quick and easy, and they get the most enjoyment out of the game by being able to flesh out a build very quickly and efficiently. And if many of those items in the economy are unreachable or cost too much or not enough supply, they're just going to have to play longer to get to the same results. And especially when it comes to transitioning from a point like Harvest League to now where you're sort of taking longer time to get the same results, I can understand why that would feel bad. That's not where I am personally, of course, but I understand why other people would not like that.
I do actually see a flaw in that logic, and that is the one where you're very, very quickly to jump the conclusion of there was more items for cheaper and everyone had more currency to everyone had more fun. Because I mean, I'm not saying that they didn't, but I'm saying is that necessarily
Give
the
us your take.
conclusion? Is that because it could also be that people are having more fun if they're taking longer to acquire the items that they need for their build? Because that's the question that I have for you guys actually in context to this league is like, are you still at this point, 1 month into the league, do you find yourself more motivated or less motivated to play more as compared to another league that would be more generous?
Just really quick before we move
Yeah,
on to the
finish your
next one,
MF
because I
topic, yeah.
already see it in chat and I know there'll be messages and comments. I picked the words trickle down economy intentionally because I fully understand exactly what it is, and it works, or it did work fantastically in PoE. I do not believe trickle down economies work in real life. This is a very different situation. That's a bullshit argument for real life. The video game is very separate.
Yes, game economies are not like real life.
Okay. Just because I already see it, and I know when I've made this argument before, I see comments in chat of being like, Baylor wants trickle down economy in real life. Bitch, I am poor as in real life. Okay. I've had my card bounce when I've tried to buy a coffee. All right. Trickle down economy is not a real thing in real life. I'm just saying those are separate things.
Also, not to hang on to the old topic for too long, but I did want to bring up 2 points. One, a common point of feedback that I heard before 3.19 was people would find a rare item on the ground and be very disappointed that it was almost worthless. And now more people find semi-rare items, Aegis Aurora being a good example, and find it actually has decent value. I do think that is a side effect of the changes, removing the item generation of the top end. I don't know necessarily how that balances the scales, but I would say that part of it is a positive effect. The other thing is in terms of people farming common currencies. In 3.19, that was very much missing. But in 3.21, things do seem to have corrected with, for example, Awakened Sextants that are incredibly easy to farm, red altars, delving, etc., and also very valuable. So I think there's other ways to keep that economy moving with an interchange of items that didn't rely on aggregating it to specifically MF or group MF, instead spreading it around, getting more people to juice more consistently, which the Atlas passives have done a great job of.
Awakened Sextants are a great example of how the game has changed in a way where it took something away from other people, but if they adapt and change their way of playing, they can still make a ton of currency. Like the infinite compass sextant strategy was removed this league, and then also the league mechanic last league spit out tons of Awakened Sextants as well. Both of those are now gone this league, and at least I don't know exactly where the balance is, but at least with both of those gone, suddenly you have a skyrocketing value of Awakened Sextants, and anyone who farms red altars, like you said, can make an absolute killing with no magic find, by the way. Completely unnecessary.
I agree with that, but what keeps bothering me? It hasn't gotten to the point where my version of what I want to play doesn't work anymore, but it keeps getting taken away from us and given to everyone else without replacing my version of play, which I know is a very the way I play is not representative of the most of the community. But there's also only so many times that you can hit the way I play and its rewards before it becomes no longer viable. And if it's no longer viable at all to play that way, I don't know if I keep playing. And that's a problem. And we've been slowly headed there for 2.5, 3 years now. And it's just consistently getting worse.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from with that. And I also play in a way that's very different from most people. But as I think about it, what would I do? Well, what have I done when crafting has changed? And the answer is I just find something different. Maybe that's a mindset thing. I tend to very much treat each PoE league almost like it's an entirely new game. What's the new Path of Exile game that Grinding Gear Games has released for me this time? And I look for things in my general playstyle, focusing on crafting, focusing on putting builds together and tinkering. Some leagues, that's better. Other leagues, that's worse. Lake of Kalandra is an example of worse, not because of any of the game changes, but just because the league mechanic didn't actually add anything that interacted with builds very much. On the other hand, Expedition was great because there were so many new skills and so many things that did interact with making builds. Also, I just really enjoyed the Expedition league mechanic, regardless of greater game changes that I know were unpopular. So for me, when the thing that I like no longer exists, I find something new that I also enjoy. I don't know if that's just a me thing, though. I don't know if this helps at all, but it's just what came to mind as you were saying that.
I have a good question for you guys. This would actually shed a lot of light on kind of our preferred way to play the game. How much time is the perfect amount of time to spend in a map? If you had your druthers, how much time do you want to spend in each map?
Oh, 15, 20 minutes?
Okay, that says everything right there. Now I have a much clearer understanding about like how you want to play the game.
Yeah.
That's
my perfect world is not MFing at all. My perfect world has no quant on. Specifically in Delirium League, you were able to juice maps so difficult that my like 6 to 8 mirror aura stacker build took like 15 minutes to clear a map without looting, and then I had to go back through and loot it.
Tropical Island, Delhi Mirror, all elevated sextants, winged scarabs,
and that was highly rewarding.
Nemesis
and it 4 had no quant and no rarity because you couldn't afford to. Your build would take power away from my build. You needed every ounce of power you could get. You needed to build the most powerful character you could. And if I could have invested another 6 mirrors, I could have upped the difficulty on my maps again and done maps that take 25 minutes and have even more loot in them. And that was the dream perfect place, which was no quantity or rarity at all. But content that difficult doesn't exist anymore.
If I remember correctly, there was a way to fit.
I just wanted to clarify, and you are rigid on that. Like you really don't want to scale it down to like 5-10 minutes. You're unhappy to be doing it that fast.
I mean, I'm not that rigid on it. You just asked what's perfect. What's my perfect?
Yes, I did. Yes,
and that's my perfect mapping experience. Was that?
I was just wondering, like, were you asking for the personal subjective best experience, or were you asking for what's the best place for the game to be in
your
general?
Your personal preferred amount of time spent in it. It says a lot for anyone who really understands the game at that kind of end game. It says a lot about what kind of mapper you are, what kind of person you are as far as enjoyment.
Yeah, my answer for that, by the way, is I don't care how long I spend in a map. I care more about my build because I'm mapping for fun. Ultimately, if I make a profit from my mapping, that's nice. But if I lose money doing something fun while mapping, I'll just go sit in my hideout and craft. I'll flip a few items and I'll have 100 divines at the end of the day.
I guess my answer would be ideally every map takes a different amount of time. Like I think the idea of the game is, or one of the ideas of the game is that there's so many different random things that can happen that no 2 maps are the same exactly, right? Sure, we can eliminate some randomness now by, removing leak mechanics from a random spawn pool and facilitating certain leak mechanics via sextants, scarabs, and all that stuff, map mods from the device. But yeah, I like it when I'd say 5 to 10 minutes on average, but like if the occasional map takes, or the high invested map like Balor runs them, takes more, I'm also happy with that. I just like that there's so many different ways to play the game, I think. But yeah, personally for me, probably 5, 10, maybe 15 sometimes, but most maps should be done in 10 minutes.
My answer most closely resonates with you guys, Tanky and Catmaster. Actually, I don't really care that much about how much time. I will adapt to whatever kind of works best. I will say this though: I remember farming Tropical Island, Delhi Mirror, Scourge League with elevated sextants and Nemesis 4, and looking at the clock and it's 40 minutes later. 40 minutes I've spent in this map. Made a lot of currency, but that was pretty. It's like the scenario if you're on a desert island alone by yourself and you have to spend every single day the rest of your life this way. That is not how I wanted it to go. So my answer is definitely closer to 5 to 10, maybe 15 minutes at the most.
That's fair. Yeah, I asked a question earlier when we were talking about the Magic Find topic, and I didn't actually mean to pivot away from the Magic Find topic. I found the entire discussion very interesting, and I know that you, Snoobay, have been coming on to discuss this among other topics. So if there's more to say, let's feel free to go on. But my question was, 1 month in, how do you feel right now relative to other leagues? Is it like as bad as we said early on it is, or is there something where I personally feel, for me, without wanting to put words in your mouth, obviously, but I'm asking the question because for me personally, I feel like that the league is falling more into place, and I'm feeling more comfortable with the state of the league than I was like a week or two ago. Maybe it's just, being willing to see past your frustrations and like looking to what is there actually to enjoy, because that's making the best of the situation, which is kind of the only thing that you can do if you feel like you want to play the game. But at the same time, no, I think I value Crucible more than I did.
I can go. I'll go first, I guess.
No, I
for
just had
me,
to laugh because Balor's facial expression was very telling. But
Yeah.
go for it.
I feel like the longer I play, the more I hit this kind of rhythm whereby I mentioned earlier that my strength does not lie in the first few days of the league. I mean, it's kind of embarrassing to say, but as well as I perform in mid league, my Kitava kill time is like 6 hours or 7 hours or something. It's not anything super amazing.
Mine's
Nowhere
about
even close to a rush. So I'm the turtle that wins the race, so to speak, I guess. And I'm not so hell bent on trying to get the absolute most I can get out of the first few weeks of the league. My time to shine, and even represented in the content viewers for my channel. I get the most amount of traction around week 3, week 4, week 5, week 6 in that time, and then of course it really does begin to fall off because people truly stop playing the game. Around like week 7, week 8. Well, at least when we had 3-month cycles, maybe not 4-month cycles. Which I guess is even more favorable for me. But I feel good. Like it's the same thing every league. The league starts. Reddit's hair is on fire. They got all that kind of things to complain about. Tenki mentioned earlier about how people make a mistake of trying to like jump the ship too fast, change their builds. They don't stay grounded. If you play multiple leagues, you can kind of get a good sense of what works, and certain fundamentals don't change all that much. You can improve your clear time for the campaign. You can get faster at opening your atlas up. You can get faster at getting into bossing. And if you're constantly trying to do new off the wall things really fast, you're trying to engage with a brand new league mechanic, nobody knows anything about it, you can really shoot yourself in the foot, just as Balor said. Kind of shot himself in the foot, I guess.
You can also find stuff before other people do and make an absolute killing.
I remember doing that in Harvest, actually. I found out that effectively eye level didn't matter because you could craft all T2 mods on cluster jewels. And so I just lived in Quarry for a few days in Harvest and made more money than anyone should because it was like 1 minute to clear it. No, it was probably multiple clears per minute, actually. It was stupid. And I just printed 5, 6 Exalt clusters.
I suppose in conclusion, I'm a more conservative player, and I am looking more towards week 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm not, and so
but are you
I'm
still?
quite happy.
I mean, you said you made a pretty good bow for yourself, and but are you still engaging with the league mechanic? Are you like making other items that you then
specifically about the league mechanic? No. I mentioned before I don't really care that much about the league mechanic. If it's let's see,
Well,
if
I
it's
thought you meant that in a
Sentinel
general
or Surge
sense.
League, and it's something that ties directly into juicing maps and getting more items, of course I'm going to be excited about it. But if it's something that's crafting based, or I guess last league it was sorry, what was it? What was the name?
Sanctum.
Yeah, out of map. Yeah, Sanctum. So it's just something completely detached from the core gameplay. I'm not very interested in it, and I won't engage with it very much at all, actually.
Okay. Yeah.
For me, well, here's the thing. Recently, I have not been very engaged with Crucible because in the last 4 days, I've done 2 or 3 maps. But I have been very engaged in crafting, and I've been very engaged in making some Crucible trees because I wanted to finish min-maxing my Poison Spark. So in that sense, it's about a normal league for me. I'm looking at this point at whatever games are coming around, what else is there to play. I tend to play PoE leagues for about a month, sometimes as long as 2, but recently it's been shorter just because there have been so many other good games. And that's no shade towards Path of Exile. I don't feel like I'm enjoying my PoE experience less. I'm getting a meaningful experience from the game. I'm just playing for less time because there's so many other things that I also want to experience.
Yeah, that's fair. Um, I mean, I already said a little bit that I've become more friends with Crucible. I just started to look a little bit more at the different items that or the different nodes that I get, and I just started listing more, getting a grip on like what sells, and it feels more like you get actual rewards out of the league now that I've fell into a groove of selling things that I find. Right, like it contributes to that the totem explodey build is so super popular. So any totem explode node for 600% or any like chance to spawn 2 totems instead of 1 sells for a not insignificant amount of chaos, and because people want to try and combine and get both of those nodes on the same bow. But yeah, I don't know. I guess also what you said, Snoo, that like in the end it's not really about looking at the league mechanic or comparing it to last league or the previous league where you had more or less, like every league is kind of a new game, like Tenki said also. And that's actually a really healthy perspective to have when you're like not comparing what you have this league and how much work you put in this league to last league, but when you actually compare it to the current meta and the current circumstances of the game, the current rule set.
Yeah,
There's a lot of
when I
people,
look
I
at
think.
Reddit comments,
Yeah.
sorry. When I look at Reddit comments and I see people who are like immediately on this first, second, third day of the league, they're all up in arms about something about the league mechanic. I mean, I just look at that. I'm like, it doesn't resonate at all. Like I can't relate to it one single bit, because not only do I not know what they're talking about, I have no interest in the league mechanic at first. I have something to do. I have the core game. I have to set myself up. I got to open my atlas. I got to do this and that. And aside from the argument that was just brought up about finding things that first before other people do, that makes sense. But aside from that, if you're a more conservative player, I mean, why do you have to try to get the very most out of a league mechanic nobody knows anything about? And then again, very high risk as far as your progression on your character and the speed at which you're getting through the league.
I think the answer to that is that a lot of people have played the base game and aren't really that interested, and they survive on the new league mechanic stuff. And if the new league mechanic stuff is boring, they look at it and go, well, I've already played the rest of this, so
Yeah.
I guess I'll see
I
you again next
concede
league.
to that
Bye.
argument. I have no way of countering that. I've only played for 2.5 leagues. Everything still feels fairly fresh, as Path of Exile is incredibly dense with league mechanics already. I mean,
I know I have been playing for a long time. That's still not me, right? If a brand new league came out and they said there is no league, by the way, here's an economy reset and the base game, I'd still be playing for at least 6 weeks with absolutely nothing. At least 6 weeks out of that. So look, I like the base game, but I think the answer is a lot of people are just bored of that unless it's a big base game rework, like when you hit like 3.0 and whatnot, right? Like it doesn't matter how good the league is then, the whole game is new. But from there until now, there's been like 13 leagues, and a lot of people are like, I've played this. I'm after what's the new thing. And if the new thing isn't great and engaging and fun, by the end of a week in, they're just like, off I go. See you later. I'll go play other games.
I can see that, but the part that I do not understand, I completely understand if someone says, oh, I'm going to go play other games. I'm going to go play D4 or Elden Ring or New World or anything else. I don't understand why someone is angry at Path of Exile when they do that. That's the part from Reddit that I've never understood.
That's just lack of
they
communication.
kind of have a special relationship with the game. Like it's almost like a toxic love relationship at that point, I think. So if things aren't evolving in the way they want it to, they're going to get straight up angry about it.
I guess because in terms of wanting new stuff, I don't care so much about the league mechanic or the base game difference. I do want new stuff in terms of builds. If there's ever a league where GGG said, no new builds, no core game changes at all, no new league mechanic, nothing, and I didn't have a list of builds that I had been meaning to play, I'd be like, yeah, I'm going to go play something else. But I wouldn't be angry about it. I'd just be like, all right, well, it's time to actually play Elden Ring because I missed that game and I've heard nothing but good things about it. Or maybe it's time to go play Star Wars Jedi Survivor if it actually runs on my computer. I'm not so sure about that. I wouldn't be upset at that point. I'd just do something else and come back to Path of Exile when there's something that interests me.
Those people aren't really angry. They just don't know how to communicate properly. What they are is disappointed, and they don't know how to get across disappointment properly. So it turns into anger because they don't know how to communicate properly. But it's disappointment. That's almost everyone on Reddit who looks inflamedly angry isn't angry at the core. They're disappointed and they don't know how to communicate that. So it looks like anger.
That plus there's been also a sort of like outrage culture building starting around the time that the expedition thing happened, right? Where people are just very upset about the direction that the devs were taking, not trying to like completely completely defend everything that was done. I mean, there was a lot of bad communication around some changes of the game that have been done in the past year. And also, like, of course, this league, I've been very vocal about criticism, right? There was a lot of things that could have gone better this league. But I wonder, you know, unless the game was perfect, I think we'd still see a reasonably bad like general tendency towards the game and a very critical comments from all sides, because that's just like what it sort of became the thing that Reddit does every 4 months, right? And that we do as a community is to collectively talk down the game,
which is weird. And I think is probably going to change over the next year, because right now, PoE has already seen a huge influx of people after the Diablo 4 betas. I expect PoE is going to see a huge outflux when D4 launches, followed a few months later by a massive influx of people who tried Diablo and said, you know, I really want more of a sandbox, or just, I've heard good things about PoE. I enjoyed Diablo 4. Let's see what this game's about. And then when PoE 2 comes out, which I don't know if it's going to be within a year, but it very well could be, we're going to see another absolutely massive influx. Completely new people, plenty of people who have probably never played an ARPG in their life, who are going to come in and try PoE for the first time.
You're also going to get a huge amount of old school PoE players who have not been around for a long time.
Yeah, but only like 1% of them are going to finish to the download.
Nah, the old school people who have like not been here for a few years, almost every single one of them is back for PoE 2. Almost every single one.
I was referring to Tanky, the new players who haven't played PoE yet.
I think you'd be surprised at how many will end up finishing the download. Because
download speeds are so much faster now than a few years ago.
Yeah. And also the numbers are always so much bigger than everyone thinks. That if you see that, let's just say 150,000 concurrent players online, that's not 150,000 people who sit on PoE 24/7. That's people constantly playing, 3-4 hours a day, logging off. Someone else logs in. And it is way more players than you think. And then you think about that, that's still, I would be surprised if PoE even now was more than 25% of the audience of Diablo. And D4?
I also think Diablo 4 will have a very positive effect on PoE 2, whether it does well or not. I mean, the better Diablo, it's not like Diablo 4, it turns into this amazing game and it just sucks all the PoE players out. No, it's going to turn into an amazing game. It's going to suck all the people who've never played ARPGs before out of whatever they were doing. And then it's just going to give an even more enormous mass of potential ARPG players that at some point may or may not migrate over to PoE.
I wonder if this transfers the same way. I wonder if these numbers are relevant. But when I look at like the last week of stream, just to give an idea of concurrent versus total, I have an average 10-hour stream today and an average concurrent viewers of 170 and an average daily individual people of 5,500. So 5,500 people stop by a day. But the average concurrent only looks like 150.
50 times.
I wonder if that transfers over to like
5.5
numbers. Like if you're getting, I don't know, is it that huge?
I'm not sure I'd say 5.5 million, based off league start numbers, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was close. It was like 2-3 mil.
That's
you push
a
a number
big
like that,
number
you're
of
gonna get-
people per day.
Yep. It's much bigger because as content creators, we all see the 1% of a 1%. 99% of PoE players probably never looked at a Twitch stream, maybe even never watched a YouTube video, possibly an official announcement. Outside of that, probably not. And all right, maybe 99% is an exaggeration, but let's just go with it. And then of that, there's a huge percentage that do that and are silent. And so the people who actually comment in chat, or who you know because they commented in YouTube, or just even post to Reddit, is 1% of that total majority of people playing. Again, I know the numbers could be nitpicked. That statistic was made up off the top of my head like most, but I wouldn't be surprised if the real numbers are still less than 5% on both.
Well, I would say you're so true that even I didn't watch Twitch streams after having streamed for like 6 months. And then finally, I was like, I want to see what this is really all about. People watching my stream. Maybe I should actually watch some other streams, see what people do. Might learn a thing or two. I don't know, but yeah, it's pretty funny actually.
I find that I also don't watch very much PoE content. Most of the content I watch, at least on YouTube, is more general gaming stuff. And then stream-wise, it's honestly people I know more than anything. Doesn't really matter what game they're playing.
It also depends, like what you just said, like 95% or 99% of players never watched a YouTube video or something like that. It's the old question of what is a PoE player? It's like if you count everyone as a player who's made an account, downloaded the game, and launched it once, then you're probably right? But then if you say everyone's a player who completed Act 10, I think most of the people who completed Act 10 have heard of a content creator, or like at least not less than 1%.
I think you'd be surprised at how many people do not watch or consume content for the games they play, even with Path of Exile. With Path of Exile, the numbers are higher, but even then, it's way lower than you'd think. And I just have a random number from my own YouTube backend. I got around 400,000 unique viewers over the past month, which is a lot of people. But if we're estimating that the player base is in the millions, it's still not that much, especially because my channel covers other games, so not everyone's just coming for PoE content.
That means the ceiling is a little higher. That's a positive thing.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Yeah, I think also that PoE 2 might be coming sooner than we think. I don't know. Like, I'm curious, but this is also highly speculative. But it feels like they've recently, with Calandra and with this league, sure, with Sanctum, they gave us a couple more features after the release, but they've been very, very, almost want to say stingy, but like very reserved with how much time they put into the league after it's been launched. There's not very much of a live service thing. Sure, they're doing bug fixes and all that, but I mean, people say that they abandoned the league already, and I think a similar sentiment was thrown around during Calandra, and it seems like they're really not doing that much in the leagues anymore, right? They reduced the scope a little bit here and there, and they're not adjusting that much after launch.
Calandra League should have been abandoned about 4 months before it was
released. Yeah.
It reminds me a bit of
infant phase.
Calandra could have been good with a couple of adjustments. It was just not.
You really want to talk about Calandra League?
No, I don't.
No,
I know I don't, but I
Really
don't
wanna
think
talk
Take it
about
back.
I think it reminds
I will put you in the corner, Bowler. You want to talk about Calandra League?
I take it back. I take it back. I'm gonna sit in the corner. I want to.
This whole thing kind of reminds me of what we saw before Betrayal, where there was a lot of things that were very radical experiments. They didn't go core. And it seemed like everything was being abandoned and thrown away. It was really that behind the scenes, they're iterating on it and preparing to release it as part of a huge update. So I think you very much might be right, Catmaster, that this is the lead up to PoE 2. They're getting these things in so they can see how the mechanic interacts with players, how players interact with the mechanic. Maybe weapon trees are a thing in PoE 2. Maybe tree trees are a thing.
Tree trees, Atlas cluster jewels. No, but what I'm saying is, I don't know. Like, I've heard some people go high on the copium of, maybe next league is already PoE 2. Maybe this is the last league before PoE 2. Like, not
Definitely
that
not.
crazy. Probably not. No, I don't even think we're gonna get a beta right after PoE 2. But what we do certainly get is the next league, and they did say that people want to be at home for that one so that they can play after ExileCon directly the next league. And we know that GGG likes to like one up themselves, right? They like to build up a big expectation and then basically reveal something that's way bigger than the expectation. Even we've seen that at ExileCon
Or go completely
1
silent for a whole league.
for a whole year almost.
Yeah.
I am officially calling when I think we get the PoE 2 beta.
All right.
I
Christmas?
think it'll be December this year. I think they're a lot closer than everybody realizes. I
But
think
then they would-
next league, the league immediately after ExileCon, will be the last full league we have without a beta of PoE 2 to play.
Wait, what? The last league before what?
And I think next we're going to come home
Oh
from
yeah,
ExileCon.
it's in
There's going to be
August, so it's going to be another 4-month league. You think?
there's going to be that league, and then before any other league starts, I think I'm going to be playing a PoE 2 beta. That's where I think we're at. I think they're way in front of where a lot of people think. I think we'll be playing a beta by the end of this year.
I don't know. I think like that we might be playing some things that will be included in PoE 2, just because they said in the past that they don't want to hold back all the quality of life and all the big changes for PoE 2, right? They said that something like that. The temptation is big, obviously, to hold back a lot of things, but we don't want to consciously hold back things that we could implement in the game right now. So I'm also like suspecting maybe next league will already get a lot of the stuff, because it does feel like they've been saving up a little with the last couple of leagues. But I don't know. I have no insider information. This is all highly just pure speculation. But I have high hopes, really high hopes, and obviously, like I said, last ExileCon they said they just revealed the next patch, and then they revealed 4.0 as PoE 2, and we got the Conquerors, which is probably like one of the biggest endgame expansions ever. And no doubt, even though they said they're not going to do any more endgame expansions, next league must be some sort of big expansion. They need some sort of big reveal at ExileCon alongside their PoE 2 news, I think.
I mean, that begs the question, though. What if the big news is the PoE 2 beta? Or what if PoE Mobile's big enough news?
There's a chance. I don't think this is the case. I do not think this is the case, but they've blown our fucking minds before, and I wouldn't put it past them being ready to launch a beta like now. And there just is no next league, and they're just like, here's a beta for 2 months, and then we're going to work on that, and then we're going to launch.
Played that through on stream earlier. Someone said that as well. Like maybe like they just revealed there is no next league and it's directly PoE 2. But like then imagine how that would be. Like then this would be the last PoE 1 league.
It wouldn't be directly PoE 2 no matter what. There's going to be a beta period.
Yeah, beta and mobile to tide people over.
Yeah, but I could see a world where they were just ready to launch the beta. And that's the reason they told everyone, go home after ExileCon. Don't plan on sticking around for weeks after. Come early if you want to hang out. Make sure you go home. There's a world where they could just be ready for the beta, like now. Like we go home from
in a way,
ExileCon,
I think that is more likely than your Christmas beta theory. Because if the beta was on Christmas, then they couldn't have the full release on Christmas. And I think they would want the full release on Christmas.
I don't know. Christmas. I'm not saying that is the case. I'm just saying they've blown our minds before, like to ridiculous levels. Like there's compilation videos of every streamer you've ever seen that was streaming back then when 3.0 launched, when we were all expecting one act, a new act. there was like a new act coming, and we were all really hyped about it. It was going to be Act 5, and then we got the removal of 2 difficulties: Act 5, Act 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, all at once. And like that blew everybody's minds collectively. So like they're not above completely subverting our expectations. Like they're just not. They're just.
I actually have a memory of that. I remember I was playing Reaper of Souls, and I saw that, and I saw there was so much hype around that, and I remember thinking to myself, maybe I'll play that game one of these days. That was it.
You are.
The end. That's how hype I got for it.
GGG are the masters of hype.
Mm-hmm.
That can be said for certain. Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm just curious what they got in store for us this time. I mean, like I said, it's all speculation. We should probably move on. We got a healthy amount of other topics to cover that are way more substantial because we actually know what we're talking about on those. But yeah, I'm very hyped to see what they got for us, and it's gonna be amazing no matter what.
So what is it?
What is it that we want to? What do you want to talk about? I think we should talk about our favorite Atlas tree stuff, maybe real quick to conclude the farming topic. We did talk about the MF stuff, so I'm just gonna start at risk of repeating myself. I'm doing Beasts, Metamorph, and Blight. Blight barely spec'd into. I'm actually spec'd into Essence, Beasts, and Metamorph, and just printing Metamorph organs and trying to get Beasts. I've been really unlucky on Beasts, and I also realized recently that with the minion build, my performance sucks really hard, and I really need to upgrade my computer. Small sidetrack. And the next league, not minion build or upgraded computer, one of the two. I need something that removes monsters more quickly from the screen and doesn't add additional entities.
Well,
But yeah,
you heard him chat. Help Catmaster upgrade his computer for next league by watching this podcast and sharing it with your friends.
thank you.
Nice. Well done.
Hey, that reminds me, we also have this engagement banner, so I don't have to ask for likes. There we go. Yeah. No, just quickly because it's always interesting when people tune into the podcast, they're new players, they think like, oh, they talk about PoE, maybe I can learn something new. And I get so many comments always from people that are like, oh, every podcast I learn something new. There's some new strategies that I can go at. So I always like to ask, if someone's starting right now or like trying to struggle to get into the softcore economy, what is something that you would recommend they could do right now? What is something that you are doing right now to make a lot of currency? And is that something, a new
Red
player
altar
could be
farm.
doing? Yeah,
I
true.
actually
You
have-
just slap on red
Raided
altars
red
and run the
altars.
maps.
Yeah, basically. I came out with 2 separate red altar strategies, one Grand Design, one Wandering Path, and they both they're both a little bit different flavor. Grand Design featured Essence because it doesn't need any small nodes at all to be very good. And Strongbox, where small nodes are pretty good for that, but you can get operative strong boxes in Grand Design. So if you don't invest in it, you're still going to make currency doing that. And both of them were essentially 0 investment strategies. Well, the Grand Design one had some compasses as optional, but I think my best Atlas I came out with this league is ironically not one that features juicing, but it's one that I may use like every league from henceforth because I discovered that the Wandering Path Atlas completion strategy is real, and you can totally self-sustain maps without ever having to buying one, or except for maybe some of the unique maps. But that you can totally complete your Atlas just by taking all the adjacent map nodes, duplicated nodes, and it might have some bout of bad RNG and slip through the cracks at some point, but pretty much you're never not going to get at least one map in a map, so long as you clear most of it. And quite often you only need to clear like 10% of it, and you're going to get 1 or 2 maps. That's progressing through the Atlas, by the way. And in this case, it was a video it's only got like 80,000 views now, I think. It's a red altar farming strategy, switching between Jungle Valley and Beach. Wandering Path, 0 investment. It was the first time I ever discovered a truly 0 investment strategy, because it seems that whatever strategy you do, you almost certainly have to invest something. But no, this one truly is. Start with one map. You don't even need to purchase chisels and alchemy orbs to begin with. Just literally one map, and you will almost certainly spiral upward into completely self-sustaining that, finding a few alch piles here, and you're just going to hit red altars like crazy in that strategy. So, and the coolest thing about that was it didn't even require a full Atlas unlock. It required one Void Stone to make a Jungle Valley T15 and Beach T14. And because of somehow how the programming works with the adjacent map drop and with singular focus, it basically made one of those two maps had to drop in every map. Basically, if you were running Jungle Valley, it almost had to drop a beach map. Seriously, it was like 98% of the time you would drop a beach map, and then vice versa. And so, and sometimes you get 3 or 4 maps, so you'd actually go have a major surplus. So I think about trying to design a strategy just like that next league, and I think I can, maybe for the first time ever, I'll actually have a really good day 1, day 2 league start and set myself off really well. Because farming Exarch altars, I might have said Eater altars before, I meant Exarch altars. That is just, that's got to be that's an S tier strategy on day 1, day 2. You can't hardly beat that with all the chaos orbs, unmaking orbs, instilling orbs, and kindling orbs actually worth something at that point. Unmaking, regret, chaos, awakened sextants ironically aren't worth that much on day 1, but still pretty good. And then you have the fiend card, the doctor card, the insane cat card. The common, actually, relative to how rare they are, they're actually quite common when farming Exarch altars. I think you're bound to find one of those every 100 maps probably, and that's like a 10-20 divine card when you find one of those potentially.
I wasn't aware of the Beach Jungle Valley adjacent map thing. I remember last league the strat with Atoll and Coves flip-flopping, but you needed more watchstones obviously to make them higher because they were much lower naturally.
I've been sending a lot of people to that video when they ask. It's like perfectly suited for like poor people, basically. Like if you've got
I don't typically make content that's
nuts.
oriented for that type of player, but I'm that type of player on day 1. Of course, I don't have money either, and how am I going to start off things? So I typically make content for myself, or what I would want to see for myself. Sometimes they just line up perfectly, whether it's juicing content or not.
Yeah, I generally don't advise what people do the Atlas strategies I pick either, because half the time it's something like my Atlas strategy is, oh yeah, I should probably get Void Stones at some point, but logbooks are really fun, so I'm going to do about 100 more before I get any Void Stones. That said, this league I forget what possessed me to do this. I just randomly said, I wonder if beasts in low-level maps are good. And so I just did beasts and essences. At this point in the league, I wouldn't do the essences, and I wouldn't go with spiders. I'd go just Camerals, a beast from the deep. And you just kind of print money. You don't need a strong build because you only need to be able to kill red beasts in T1 maps, and it is actively detrimental to do it in higher tier maps. Someone that I know actually took this to its extreme and farmed around 500 divines. Then delving.
I actually get questions there because we talk about this a lot on the stream because I do beasts and I advertise the strat, seeing that there is a constant need for imprints and splits this league with how they are used to make the better crucible trees. And I've had a lot of chat about that. One thing I'm unclear of is what is the minimum level to spawn for Krashik Camerals and Phenomenal Plagued Arachnids? Is that, can they spawn any map tier 1 already? Or is it tier 4?
Pretty sure it's tier 1.
Yeah, no, there's no requirement.
I was just unsure because I didn't know where to find it. So I didn't want to recommend people do this in tier 1 maps if I'm not absolutely sure that they can actually spawn there.
I'm 80% sure you can get them in the campaign now.
Yeah.
You'd have to get giga lucky. There's no way to farm that intentionally. But I don't think anything locks you out of being able to get them.
Okay, crazy. Well, because obviously there's a lot of beasts that you can only get in higher tiers, and so you're taking them out of the pool effectively. So you're making it way more likely. Does that outweigh the benefits of farming tier 14 plus in terms of getting the progression towards the altars, the bosses, the boss invitations, and of course the bonuses from the altars?
I would say early on, absolutely yes, because there are so many beasts that are extremely valuable early in the league. And obviously you have to go all in on the strategy. You can't just do I'm going to do beasts for 20 maps. Won't work. But if you go all in, do hundreds of maps with them, maybe 1,000 maps early, that is going to make you bank.
Yeah.
Also,
Yeah.
I looked on the trade site. The lowest level created Cameral is 68. So either
Okay, might be map only.
Yeah, I think it's map only.
That's fair.
Or the low ones are
tend
already
to-
bought because they're so easy. No.
I tend to flat up ignore any Atlas strategies that involves going back to white maps because I hate it and I wish it didn't exist. It does, and it's quite useful, but I hate them. I don't want to. I want to be in high tier maps. Like,
I just had a conversation on Discord. There are some people in my community who kind of long for the days of old where they're farming, nurse cards and tier 4 tower or whatever. Yeah, some people really miss that.
Yeah,
I don't either personally, but in fact, I don't know if this question will be asked, but if you were to ask my absolute most favorite, I don't want to say league mechanic, but mechanic that GGG has ever brought out in the 2.5 years that I've been playing, it would have to be altars. Eldritch altars is my absolute favorite thing. As far as what that did for juicing, it was just completely. I know they took a lot of things away in the process, going from Scourge League to Arch Nemesis League, but that's when it was introduced, and it was just absolutely wonderful. In my opinion, I know like Valor may not agree with this, but in my opinion, it made for some really riveting aspirational mapping potential there. When you're just slamming in all these different juicing up your map further and further and further and further,
I mean, it's
especially with the
essentially
player
what you
quant
earlier
rarity
said.
altars.
You would like to be able to add more and more maps to add mods to a map without like actually having to stop at 8 mods, get 15 mods, get 20. And altars are in a way doing that, right? They add
in a
mods
way
to
they
your
are
map.
Doing that. Yeah. When you look on the right screen, you see it has 350% increased quantity and rarity and 40% chance to dupe div cards. I mean, you get a little bit excited when you still have some of the map left to clear.
Oh, see, I look at that screen and I see 60% reduced life recovery because I have 4 endurance charges, minus cold and lightning res, so I'm not res capped without my flask, no physical mitigation from armor, and I realize I'm an RF jug and I still haven't died somehow yet.
I
didn't know where you were going to take that, but I mean, that's where it becomes aspirational. If you can have a character that can handle all of that craziness, you're going to have a hard time taking a Deadeye glass cannon into that situation and coming out 6 portals later with all the loot. Good luck.
I think I originally hated it because of what got taken away at the same time. But if I just look at altars on their own, I think I love them.
And they've gotten better. They have actually improved. I've always been.
Oh yeah.
My people kept biting their nails about all the different changes. Are they going to change this gem? Are they going to change this build, the meta, and all that? The biggest moment when I was biting my nails, right before they came out with the new altar manifesto, I was like, "Oh God, please don't kill these. Please don't. They're the best thing you've ever put in the game." And nobody else seemed to be that concerned about it, but in the end, they made it even better.
Maybe it's just because I've been around for so long, but I'm never biting my nails looking at patch notes. If something gets killed, there's always going to be something else that players cannot possibly imagine. Like, altars are a good example. If you asked someone in Expedition or Scourge, what's GGG going to add next to endgame mapping? I don't think anyone would have said altars. But they're here. They're pretty awesome. And will they go away someday? Probably, because that's the game. PoE is nothing if not change. There's going to be something else awesome that replaces them.
I mentioned that I would adapt, and that's kind of against the grain of what I said earlier about, I'll just take whatever comes at me and I'll adapt. But altars are a bit of an exception. I truly am like really grateful that they exist and very happy. And I would feel the pain Valor feels if they were to take them away someday, I guess.
I'm still waiting for the new thing that replaces my 100% Delhi fractured map style farming. It never got replaced with anything. Nothing even close.
Not yet.
It's been a while.
Valor, I got something exciting to tell you. One of my next videos I'm going to try to do before I retire the poison tornado shot, I'm going to try to do the most aspirational mapping content that can possibly be done on them. I'm going to try to do 100% Delhi magic finding on Cemetery with that strat.
Do it.
I'm going to try to pull it off. I don't know if it'll work. I don't know if my GPU can take it, actually. It's a real big concern. But I'm going to try.
Turn your sounds off if you
forward
haven't
to that.
already.
I've already confirmed it can be done. It's just the amount of stress it puts on the computer and obviously, myself.
Just real quick, do you know how to turn sounds off properly with the infing file?
I've looked into that a little bit. I've not tried that completely, no, but maybe
will
we
have
can have a
to.
conversation later about that.
You will have to do that content. The sound engine will die if you don't, and it'll kill your whole client.
Yeah, I've heard you talk about that. You have to go deep into your computer settings and actually turn
No,
off.
it's super easy. In fact, it'll only take 10 seconds to explain. So I'll do it for anyone in chat as well who's wondering.
Go ahead.
Because sound in this game is the worst part of the engine. It causes the most amount of stress on your game. So if you're really having problems with performance, turning sounds off helps the very most of anything you could possibly do. There is a file in the same part that your loot filter is in, and it is called config.ini. So you open that up to edit it, close the PoE client, look for the bit that says sound effects, and change it to false. This is much different from turning the sound effect volume all the way down to 0 in the client. If you turn it down to 0 in the client, it still plays all of the sounds, it still cues all of the sounds. You just don't hear them because they play at 0 volume. If you open config.ini and you change it to false, it doesn't queue up or play any of the combat sounds. And that will increase your performance in like very juiced maps nearly 5-fold, because the sound is the biggest problem with the client. So if you change that to false, all your combat sounds will disappear, but your performance will go through the roof.
I don't know though. You mean I'd have to do away with the tink sound? My
Yeah.
viewers get all that
Loot
dopamine
filters
from
still
watching
work.
me play.
Loot filters still make sounds.
Okay. We're good then.
It's just combat sounds, things like the monsters
just
exploding.
combat
Okay,
sounds.
I mean,
and unfortunately,
almost
still the
sounded
sound of you
unacceptable.
putting chaos away in his stash and whatnot. Those count as combat sounds for some reason.
Also, voice lines do stay on, so if you
Mhm.
ever wanted to hear what Cassie is singing, you'll still be able to.
Wow.
You only lose combat sounds, which is unfortunate because I really like shatters and pop explosions and whatnot, but that is what causes the most amount of performance issues in the entire game. So
The crystal skin sound of crystals spawning under your character when it's not your minions or your totems hitting them, or like I don't know, like people told me on SRS they make the sound. On animate weapon I've like repeatedly found I don't get a special sound. It sounds like the animate weapon hitting anything else really. That's very unfortunate, but I've learned like my movement patterns are the problem. I just need to always circle and stutter step and all that. Yeah, I hope that one day they actually implement that in the engine, that like when you turn the sound to 0, that it actually like doesn't play the sounds. I wonder whether that's actually still the case or whether that's outdated knowledge, but I figure you tested it or something like that. I just don't see why it should continue playing in the background when you put it to 0. It should actually fully disable it in game. The same way
most
like
games do that.
Yeah.
Well, most games still play the sound files. They just play them at 0 volume. Standard practice.
There's a lot of stuff like that with games because disabling the calls themselves is a different function than changing the volume. And you'll have to effectively reinitialize the engine, which I believe requires a restart. At least it used to require a restart to turn sound back on. You couldn't just slide the slider.
We can now turn them back on just by sliding the slider back up, but you have to have PoE closed and the production config.ini open to change it off again.
Right. There was like one thing. Yeah. No, it's I mean, obviously for us maybe a little bit too much in depth, but for the not so tech savvy player in the audience that's listening in without video, definitely good to have that in detail explanation in there. Thanks, Beller. There's one thing I wanted to hook back to because I thought that related a little bit to what you were talking about, like your 100% delirium project and all that. When you were talking or when you're posing the question to us of how long we want our ideal map to be, I did completely forget the aspect of like focus and chat interaction and all that. I very much like my maps to have many safe spots where I can like chill, take a breath, and take a sip of my glass, or like read a chat message and interact with chat without being afraid of like losing out in the game by randomly dying or missing some modifier and putting myself at risk of only, right? I think this is the perfect time to bring up, like we do every episode, how much we want the ultimatum freeze back. Please, GGG, if any one of you is listening, we would very much like multiple points in the map at which the entire thing is frozen and we can just consider our options. We can walk away, make a new coffee.
please.
We could, answer questions in chat, because I found like a lot of my recent deaths that frustrate the shit out of me in softcore trade are not only due to playing a very ballsy softcore character that barely has defenses, not in the same way, at least, as I would play it in hardcore, but also the fact that I just get like really negligent and I like try to make a good stream and I actively get punished for like doing chat interaction and for thinking about what I say. And that's like getting me so hard.
So
Yeah.
here's the key to that.
Okay.
Play a build that cannot die.
Play Righteous Fire Juggernaut.
I mean, my Spark Pathfinder's totally fine too.
Any Pathfinder with the right levels of defenses is super
I
tanky.
have a different solution for you. Just play Tornado Shot and just don't let go of right click. Doesn't matter where you aim. It's gonna fire so many arrows out in the screen. That's literally what I do. I just thought about it right now. When I want to read the chat, stand wherever I am, I just don't let go of right click, and so it's just constantly firing off. And anything that comes in the screen, it's just gonna just incinerate instantly. It's just done. So
funnily enough, that might work in hardcore as well, because I noticed that Quantric was playing Poison Tornado Shot.
Hardcore. Oh man, maybe you're gonna get me into hardcore after all if I can play Tornado Shot. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely want to go back to hardcore at some point. But yeah, I just wanted to connect that back to the topic of how long should the perfect map be. Because if my maps were 25 minutes long, I maybe would like to have a safe spot in the middle where I can go off and do things. Right? I just like to have a very bite-sized play units when playing Path of Exile, because that allows me to do all the other things that I need to do during a broadcast. And yeah. That's definitely a factor that I didn't bring up earlier when you posed the question. I was thinking purely from a personal play.
That's kind of a
enjoying
streamer
sort of
only
view.
factor, though. So
Yeah.
it's not
I don't know.
really-
Even if I wasn't streaming, I just like to listen to podcasts or like listen to YouTube videos while I game, and I like to like go off and do something. Like when my cat comes and meows and says, "Oh, do you want food? Or should I lift you up and put you on my lap or something like that?" I just like to have more safe spots in the game. Makes it easier for me to commit to being like, oh, I do another map. No, I do another this or that. If I know that there's going to be a jumping off, obviously you can always log out or portal out. That's always the case. Yeah.
Harvest's a good one, by the way.
Yeah, also exactly. Just run into that harvest. Sure, you gotta make sure that there's no delirium active or something like that. Sure, the delirium fog is frozen, but there could be random delirium monsters walking up to you.
Ironically,
gotta
that
make
is
sure.
the one time you can just AFK in a delirium mirror. You just take the harvest thing, you just stand there and don't move. And
Yeah.
nothing will probably come at you, and the fog will not move either.
It's great stuff. Yeah. So another topic I wanted to talk about a little bit is crafting. I personally noticed that there's a lot of fractured items on the builds of the people that I play with, and I was wondering whether you think that fractured items in the current item creation meta have a good role. Are they fulfilling a good role? Are they maybe a little bit too easy to craft? Are the drawbacks not strong enough, or do you think they deserve their place and the players deserve their fractured items the way that they are currently?
I think
I'm pretty
there
happy
aren't.
with
I
fractured
think there
items.
aren't enough good ways to craft most things without starting with a fracture. So I don't want them taken away because it's the only thing we've got right now. But it would be better if we had other systems that worked well.
I think it depends on the level of min-max we're talking here. Because there are points where fractured items are very strong. There are points where they're very easy to craft. And there are points where they're strong but incredibly difficult. A good example of this is a friend of mine has a fractured bow for Tornado Shot, Great Crucible Tree, +2 arrow fracture, good old T1 LE prefixes. It cost almost 200 divines to make that, even with the fracture. Because what you had to do is make the Crucible Tree with the imprint system. That's going to cost you a fortune. Then you roll the +2 arrows. Imprint, 4 mod, fracturing orb, That is something like 6 divines for a 1 in 4. You do that until you hit the +2 arrows. Then you get to spamming essences and crafting those prefixes. And then you have to not accidentally fill the suffixes. Then, after all that, assuming you didn't fill the suffixes or you landed in a null, you ashling and get your last suffix and you're good.
Sorry, were you able to confirm that? Because I could have swore I read in the wiki before I attempted to also craft a +2 fractured bow this league that you can't imprint an already fractured item. So yes, you can imprint it before
Correct.
fracture, but you can't revert it back.
So you build the tree first, and then you get the fracture.
Well, you can do it that way, of course, and risk the 1 in 4. But as far as like getting the best of both worlds, imprinting and then also reverting it back, like blowing the fractured orb and then imprinting back to a non-fractured state, I was under the impression that cannot be done anymore.
No, but you can revert the fracture with the vendor recipe.
The vendor recipe, yeah.
The whetstone recipe, yeah. We all assumed when
Wow,
that
I
got leaked or
didn't-
got
I
told
didn't know
about,
that.
Yeah, so you
we
vendor
all
the
assumed
bow
it would be, yeah.
with
Oh,
a
okay.
whetstone, and it retains the crucible tree. Sorry, I was probably a little.
So that
unclear
is
with
a loophole I was completely unaware of. That's good
Yes.
information.
It means you just get back a white base with the same tree, and then you have to roll your +2 arrows again, try for another fracture, and if it fails,
Right. So
render it back,
presumably
roll
it's like,
again.
oh, it turns white, so it's worthless now, right? You lost your imprint, but actually this league, it retains its most important quality, the crucible tree.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Very expensive.
Who cares about that?
Yeah. As a 200 divine bow.
Just currency.
Yeah.
Can make it back in 1 mage blood.
And it's interesting because there's a level where fractured items are not good. There's a level where they're extremely good. And it's almost kind of this weird middle range where they're not good. That super low-end items, fractures are great. There's a lot of really cheap fractures that offer insane power.
Mhm.
Then, as you get up to mid-tier, min-maxing, the highest end of that cuts off where fracture isn't as good anymore because it is too inconsistent to hit what you want, when what you want is, on many item slots, actually influences with elevations. Then you push over that and you go towards mirror tier or just below mirror tier. And all of a sudden fracture becomes good again because influences don't matter when you reach item perfection with mods that have insanely low weightings like +2 arrows and T1 prefixes.
Yeah, I think fracture is actually great. It's especially good for solo self-found. I mean, the biggest plus I would see it on is solo self-found as a way to accumulate more gear that you can self-craft with materials that you only find that can actually afford in a solo self-found environment. But even in trade, an example is that I don't look at fractured items. So I don't know. I guess I've evolved past, and my loot filter is too strict to mess with fractured items at this point. But that's good in an economy. You know, I'm not picking up alteration orbs. I'm not picking up alchemy orbs anymore. Some people are still picking those up. So because there are many people like me who are no longer looking at them, the market just doesn't endlessly crash on those items. It reaches a point where a certain kind of player is going to want those on the loot filter. They look at alteration orb, 20 to 1 or what, like 10 to 1 chaos or something. I say that's good enough for me. I'll pick up a stack of 4 alteration orbs. That's worth a click. And they'll also willing to look at fractured bases forever and a day, and they're willing to suffer through that extra time to find the jackpot item. And thanks to that person, we actually have those in the market, and they get to make a killing on that. Maybe it's not the most efficient way to make currency, but the point is they're having fun doing that, and it's the way they want to play the game. And I'm really grateful that a system like that exists, where we can all kind of, you know, the high end player, the lower end player, the in between, we can all kind of work together in that sense.
That's
PoE economics, you know.
Yeah. One of the best things about the PoE economy is it creates situations where you want an item but are unwilling to pick that item up off the floor yourself. Therefore, you have to rely on someone else to pick it up for you, which, when the economy is at its best, it is through interactions just like that.
You're literally both describing the exact thing that is the reason that those 5-man, 6-man, 8-man Magic Find parties was good for the economy, by the way. You're describing exactly what was happening. Just want to point that out.
True, but I would say the difference is it is best when it's distributed more. which I feel like the change actually did do successfully after 2 leagues of iteration. Hopefully another
Just
couple
saying.
leagues. And
I mean, I don't have anything against crazy high-end party juicing personally. I would hope it never reaches a point where, I mean, in Diablo and Reaper of Souls, you had to play with a party. If you wanted to level your unique gems higher level, you had to play with a party to get there. I don't want PoE to reach a point where I have to play in a party to get the highest level of something. So long as it doesn't reach that point, I'm totally cool with it.
Yeah, without like wanting to go back too much into the MF discussion, I do think that while it was never the perfect way of playing in a group, like you pointed out on several occasions, Baller, it was perceived as one of the best ones, right? And that in itself created I almost want to say like a very like one-dimensional perception of Path of Exile, where like, many people felt like that is the way that they need to play in order to be at the top tier, and many people felt like the only way to get to that level of wealth is to build Magic Find stats themselves, rather than playing in one of the many other ways that you can specialize into the game.
Yeah.
So maybe that is another positive aspect of that change, even though it did take away that playstyle quite strongly. But another thing I wanted to hit at with the fractured items is that no one actually hinted at, which I was surprised. I purposefully left that out of the topic document because I was curious. I was like, well, will people lead that into the same topic that I mentally do? And that is, I just think that the new influences are relatively compared to the old influences way too strong. That's just the old influences need a buff. They require affix slots on the items. They don't interact with fractured or with synthesized. Or I guess the new influences also don't work with synthesized. But you know what I mean, right? It's even without fractured items.
I just didn't say it.
Yeah, and I mean that is a very close topic. Definitely reasonable to think of that. What I wanted to say is, even without fractured items, I think that the new influences beat out the old influences in many cases, right? Especially because they're so easy to just tack on to a finished item, and you don't need to consider them in the item creation process. They're more like an afterthought to a good item with good affixes. Whereas with the old influences, Shaper, Elder, and stuff, you only get one shot at combining and making double influenced item, and then you have to work with a double influence base, which is counterproductive in many creation processes. And it's just there's, I guess, a lot of that word is thrown around a lot, but in that case, it's accurate. A lot of friction.
You get a whole extra 2 mods on the item. It becomes an 8 modded item as opposed to 6, and people were using, of course, they were using hunter influenced items or whatever on, I don't know, an assassin chess piece. Congratulations, you got 3% increased movement speed as a prefix. So you're still a 6 mod item with like a fraction of 1 extra mod. Granted, there are some very powerful mods on there, like +1 additional curse and stuff. So there are some unique situations where it works. But yeah, it's pretty hard to compete with some of those mods.
It's mostly when you're getting double and triple elevated mods. That's when your influence items can outstrip your normal ones. You're looking at double and triple elevated versions.
Or pseudo gem links.
Yeah.
Yeah, those righteous fire helmets.
The thing is, they're also so plentiful and so easy that like everybody can use them. So I don't know. I think it's all right.
I think what I would like to see is a little bit more specialization. That it feels weird to me. You can get 6% action speed on your boots as an implicit, and then you can also get tailwind as a suffix. I'd really like to see more things like chess piece, where you can't get 2% all max res from any of the old influences, but you also can't get base crit from the new ones. You can't get plus curse from the new ones. They do different things with, yes, there's some overlap, but they do different enough things that it feels like you use them for their own purpose. And I don't like systems where they overlap. Dot multi on gloves is another example. Why is it on the new influence as an implicit and the old one as an explicit? Give them different purposes, like exposure on gloves. That's a good one. Doesn't overlap with anything. And let people build their items around what they actually need rather than which is the best version of the thing I'm going to have anyway.
Yeah.
That's a fair point.
Yep. That's actually a very reasonable take. I'm happy with that. As we're running already over the 2-hour mark, should we quickly tackle the remaining two big talking points? I mean, we've already touched upon this a little bit. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about the way that you make builds? How do you prioritize different aspects of the build? And then when we're done with that, we could still talk a little bit about game balance if we're not too long. Should end up
Mine-
before.
Mine is probably
Yeah.
worse than other people's.
Well, then you
How
go
I
first.
tend to make builds and how I tend to make the best versions of my builds is I have a rough idea of what I want. I build roughly the skeleton of a tree, and then I just start playing. And I figure out what its weaknesses are as I go and how I want to fix them as I go. I almost never have a full plan in mind when I design a new build that I'm not just like copying from someone else. It's never a full plan. It's a basic idea, and I just fucking run with it and just figure it out on the go.
It's the most fun way.
Yep. It's the way I like it the most. It's definitely not the most efficient. Roughly 50% of my builds fail miserably because the weaknesses are too strong and I don't have a way to fix them. But I don't know. I have a lot more fun that way. Just dive in.
I always start by looking at what other people are doing, and then I think about ways where I do the complete opposite. Because if I do what everyone else is doing, then I'm going to fall into the same traps. If I think about, all right, what's the opposite of what they're doing? It's probably a terrible idea, and I confirm that, or I find something really good. After that, I then put the build together, and I focus on quality of life. Damage, don't care about that. Currency fixes that. Defenses, all right, yeah, those have to be pretty good because if you're dying constantly, the quality of life is terrible. After that, do I have to hit 8 buttons? Well, that's a problem. How can I cut that number in half? Maybe 3, 4 buttons. Is it super, super slow? Is it janky? Is it positional? I want to get rid of as many of those things so the build feels great to play. And any problems I run into along the way, it's just a matter of fixing it with currency.
Yeah, I'm pretty. I think I'm pretty methodical at it. Actually, first thing I try to think of. I mean, generally speaking, I'm going for a mapping build, not bossing. First of all, and I think about what I want the build to be able to do, what kind of content I have in the back of my mind I would like it to be able to do. And usually it starts with 1 or 2 specific core items. I already mentioned Soul Eater is a big kicker for me. So in the case of the last build I made, Zerfie's heart was at the center of the build. And incidentally, anytime somebody asks me, "Hey Snoo, how can we replace Zerfie's with anything?" Or if I want to do this build without Zerfie's, I'm always left kind of dumbfounded because I'm like, I don't really have an answer for you. I'm sure there is an answer, but you're asking the creator of the build to betray the literal reason why he created the build. So I don't really, I'm not interested in answering that question. Really, I think you can figure it out. It's almost mildly offensive, actually, but I try to be kind. Let people know that's that this is the starting point of the build. So if you don't want that item, then you want a different build entirely, basically. But yeah, I build around an item. I'm very unique heavy based. I really like unique items. I also like crafting. In the case of my current build, it's crafted helmet, quiver, and bow, and I made an entire video about that. I'm not a big crafting guru, but I figured out enough on how to do it. I know how PoEDB and all that works. I use PoE Ninja for inspiration, like Tenki, I think, suggested he did. But I don't even begin going for a build until I have fully fleshed it out. I mean, every single piece of gear, all the rolls on it. I basically know every single roll on every single piece of gear I'm going to have before I make the build, and it has to be possible. Currency be
almost the
damned.
opposite
I
of
don't really
what I'm
care how much
doing.
it costs. Yeah, I don't care how much it costs, but I'm going to make it happen. And a surprisingly number of people will follow that, regardless of how prohibitively expensive it may be. So that's how I
The
go about it.
exact opposite approach to how I make shit. It's just,
Yeah.
I go, that's a fun idea. Does that interaction work? Yes, it does. All right, off we go. I'm making a build.
I just do 15 more steps after that. Make sure everything works.
Yep. It's also why I think the builds that I make rarely fail, and I'm guessing the ones you make rarely fail as well, because if they're going to fail, they're caught at one of your earlier
They
steps.
fail in the POB before I get done making it, and they never see the light of day. So
Yep.
that's how it goes.
Roughly
Yeah.
half of my builds just fail.
Yeah.
But I'm aware, like I know how to do all the planning. I don't find all of that fun. I find playing and figuring out what's wrong fun. So I just do it that way.
There's nothing wrong with that. There's incredible downside to spending. I mentioned 100 hours. I wasn't being hyperbolic. The last build I made, I no doubt in my mind, at least 100 hours of my time were spent on the
Ooh.
POB, looking at that, or at least if I combined the POB, writing the script for the video and everything. But I'm also trying to heed the warning from many other content creators like you guys as I begin messing around with build creation. I look around in the past history and what other content creators have said about doing this whole thing. It can be very stressful, and it can go really, really awry. Suddenly, you can make the community extremely upset, and can almost be a dangerous endeavor, I guess. So that's another reason why I take it really seriously, because I don't want that to happen, obviously.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. I mean, I do my fair share of SSF play, or at least did so in the past before I converted recently to more of a software trade sort of approach. Even though, I mean, I'm not nowhere playing trade like you guys with min-max economy approach and all that. I'm just basically in for the ride and play SSF in software trade, taking advantage here and there of the economy for sure, but like definitely not trying to min-max the advantage that I take out of it. Most of the time, just like trying to have a good time, usually with a lot of fear of missing out, like the last couple of leagues. But this league, I tried to completely let go of fear of missing out, and just like, hey, I'm here for the ride. 4 months, no matter whether I have trade or not, I can make a good build in 4 months, probably even more than one, right? Like, doesn't matter whether I have trade or not. If I was playing SSF, I'd probably be able to make a good build. So with trade, I can. And yeah, like I don't know. I really haven't changed my approach around build a lot. I would like to maybe plan out my next build properly and have it so that on paper it makes sense, and I know that it's going to be worth the time leveling that I put into it, because I don't like to waste my time in a non-entertaining way, I guess. Although maybe it would be entertaining if the build fails, right? But I usually don't plan. I usually go with the SSF approach of like, I'll just pick a skill and a class, and I'll see what the game throws me, and then I'll put that into the build. And I realize that for league starts, that's kind of counterproductive. So I often league start with something that I've played in the past that I know to work, and where I know I don't need very specific items to get to a certain point of comfort. That would be my place where I come from when making builds. But yeah, other talking points regards to builds that I had written down was how do you deal with the high expectations of the people? And let's just compress both questions into once. And the increasing need to fit immunities into your builds with all the different debuff effects that we have nowadays. I mean, there's like, alone elemental ailments. There's like 7 different elemental ailments, and then there's the physical ailment and the chaos, and then there's corrupting blood, which is not an ailment but still a damage over time debuff. And you kind of need to deal with every single thing, and almost every league it becomes more. Do you drop some of those?
Storm Shroud and Ancestral Vision.
Yeah, okay, that's one way.
I do something every time. I just make him immune to everything. I hate ailments.
Yep.
Purity of elements is the
Purity-
default starter plus point, and then when you've got more money, you fix it a different way and you drop purity for a real aura. That's every build for me.
Same. And at least this league, it's easier than ever because you can get 100% Shock Avoid as a shield crucible tree.
Mhm.
Shields are pretty good. Put in Storm Shroud for 1 jewel. I mean, if you're really lucky, you get Corrupted Blood on it. That's all ailments solved.
Yep.
Yeah, there's like a defensive checklist you kind of have to make, not just for elemental ailments, but corrupted blood immunity to a lesser extent. But or not really a lesser extent, I guess, a certain amount of health pool. There are some workarounds like Petrified Blood Progenesis combo. It's going to make you extremely tanky, even if you're on a total glass cannon. Headhunter is often an obvious workaround by itself there. I look at, fortunately, I've played enough now. I kind of know the basic defensive layout I like. I think one extraordinarily underrated defensive combo that has been a signature of my builds, many of them, is Daraso's Defiance combined with Immortal Call, especially if it's on cast when damage taken. Daraso's Defiance is pretty good armor, but it has a special mod that gives you an endurance charge on kill 100% of the time. And if you're playing on a character that kills things very quickly and also doesn't get hit hardly ever, that can produce a really cool situation whereby you almost always have endurance charges, and when your Immortal Call procs and you do get hit, you get the full force of that almost every time, because it rips off the endurance charges, and then you get it. Now, you lose endurance charges if you get hit anyway, but it prioritizes cast damage taken over the Daraso's Defiance armor. So it is uniquely strong in that sense. So I rock with the level 3 cast and damage taken, level 5 Immortal Call, I think it is, and Daraso's Defiance, and that is an easy combo to make. A typical Boyer, dodge or evade based character really strong. It's not going to work so well for armor based or ES based, but for evasion based characters, especially with Grace on, many people in my community have told me how surprised they were at how tanky some of these characters that I've made are, and that is a big part of it. Just that combo, that very small combo right there.
That's a really cool interaction. But then you don't get Eldritch Implicits on your chest piece.
I've never played with Eldritch Implicits on my chest. I always use a unique armor one way or another.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, I know they're good, but that's the mark of a good game, right? It's balance. You have to give up something. You can't just get everything you want. You gotta find the balance. That's why it's fun.
Yeah,
No,
I would say.
great. Please go ahead. I was just gonna say that it is great that with the increasing power of rares, there's still a couple of uniques that are just so incredibly good. You're gonna value them over anything else you could put into your build for the entire time of the build.
Mm-hmm. I like having well-rounded defenses. I usually combine multiple defensive layers to a point where a lot of people say it's overkill. But at the end of the day, a lot of the people who say my defenses are overkill also complain that monsters are too rippy. And then I get to, I guess, have the last laugh after all the deaths. Although I'm not quite sure that's how it works, since everyone else just respawns anyway.
It also depends on how frustration resistant are you. Some people don't mind. Some people like to embrace the full softcore playstyle. I paid for 6 portals, that's why I'm going to use them, right? And other people like myself are like, hey, any single death that I suffer with my character takes wind out of my sails and makes me hate myself more while playing the game. So, yeah. I just like to minimize
Tanky and
that.
I have very different audiences, I bet. He's going to attract a certain type of player who wants to become immortal, and they're not terribly concerned about how, quickly they run through the map or whatever. I'd be willing to bet we probably have a similar ratio or threshold of people who would complain about our build being too squishy or too glassy, even though mine is probably 20 times more glassy than his. It's just because I would attract a certain kind of player who understands, perfectly willing to deal with the fact that you get hit once, you might die. That's just how it goes.
Cast on death portal builds.
I never do that though. That is a litmus test for me. Build has to be tanky enough for cast on damage support. Cast on death support is not going to be a huge improvement.
I'm happy to league start a cast on death portal build, but I'm not happy to keep playing one for very long.
Pressure on gem sockets is just too big, dude. It's not worth the 2 gem sockets.
I'm not so degenerate that I will go there. I just can't. I can't go that glassy. I can't do it.
Like when I started my MF journey this league, I was using an average of 3 portals a map.
Average.
I built my headhunter in 2 days.
Well, I had the question, what's your preferred amount of time per map? Why don't I ask the question, what is your preferred death counter per map.
Per map?
The answer
Or-
is 0, but I'm
Or
happy
however
to.
many, maps, one and however many maps. No,
No,
really,
I-
serious question. What's acceptable for you?
Look, if I die once or twice a day on my 8 or
Okay.
12-hour days, that's fine.
What? That's not very weak.
Anything more than that, I'm not like super happy about. I actually prefer not to die, but I will build literal cast on death portals, average 2.5 to 3 portals a map characters for like a week to like build a ton of currency without having to invest into that character, knowing full well that character's stuck at level 92 forever and will just die twice a map. Like I know what's happening here. I'm happy to go in and play that, but I can't stay there. Like that has to be a goal-oriented thing where, okay, I've got this squishy boy and it will die a lot. But in 3 or 4 days, I'll have this headhunter and this amount of currency to go build something that won't do that anymore.
Also,
Probably could have rephrased the question. Yeah, go ahead.
towards day 3 and 4, he does tend to get pretty grumpy with the deaths.
Yeah, I don't like. I'm happy to build that character, but it will grate on me. Like I will be like, oh man, I'm dying too much. I gotta stop this.
How high do you want to level before you have to purchase 5 ways? It would be the rephrased question.
I never purchase 5 ways.
You
If my
get them for
character
free.
can't get past level 92, then it doesn't deserve to be past level 92.
You have more dignity than me, then.
See, I don't actually care about my level in terms of purchasing 5 ways. I care about what those extra levels give me. If the next couple levels don't give me anything, don't really care. The next couple levels are a cluster jewel. All right, I'm buying them right now. I don't care if I'm gaining good EXP and maps. I'd rather have them now.
I hate 5 ways. If my character can't get there, then it doesn't deserve it. That's just how my brain works.
I think the game would be a lot better if they didn't exist. Certainly. I don't like the fact that there's such an outrageously. I mean, it's so ridiculous now. You actually make money being a AFK in there by leveling gem. How ridiculous is that? It shouldn't be that way anymore, I don't think.
It shouldn't, but I'm going to use it until it no longer exists.
I'm not against people using it. I don't think it should exist, but I just hate it. I just don't find it fun at all. And plus, when my characters hit level 100, I tend to like feel done. Like I'm done with that character and now I want to move on. That feels like the end point to me most of the time, where I'm like, okay, well, this one's finished.
Most people feel a great sense of relief, like they can actually play the game without being so high strung, worrying about dying, and then they can, they can actually invest in strategies that are far more rippy and not worry as much about it. I think.
For instance, in Delirium League that I was talking about, where I had like a multiple mirror strength character, the character hit level 100 because of course it did, and then I played for like 2 more days and realized that I was not having fun anymore because it was level 100. So I made a brand new Scion and just transferred all the gear over to it and started leveling again. And just played the exact same build with the exact same gear at a lower level so that I could get XP again.
You know what it sounds like to me? It sounds like you want there to be a Paragon system, Balor.
You know what? I do, but I don't want it to give me any stats. I want it just to be a number.
So you want a prestige system?
Oh,
yeah,
no.
Just give me a number so I can be like, I've been level 100 for 1,800 extra level 100s.
Yeah, Bella wants an EP that grows every time
Yeah.
he collects
No
enough
stats,
XP.
no nothing. Just a number that shows how much XP I've got.
I think you raised a very fair point there, Balor. I think that's something I really enjoy about playing softcore trade. As someone who came from mostly playing hardcore back in the day, is that I can start a build and it can be rippy, but I know in a couple days I might stop dying and it might actually be a build that that way could work in hardcore, right? Even though it might not be on the way there. Whereas in hardcore, I start the build, I die in the first map I do, and it's like, oh, haha, funny little experiment. Now let's go play a real build, right? And I think a lot of builds that I used to do in HCSSF just got shut down very early because of, not being able to get the right ratio of defense and offense early on.
Yeah. And to come back to the potentially more controversial topic of expectations towards builds, I genuinely do not understand why people have the expectation of builds doing Ubers unless they're specifically advertised as such.
Oh.
Honestly, if Ubers could be removed from PoE tomorrow, I think, unfortunately, the game would be improved. I'd rather they aren't removed. I'd rather they're fixed, fully detached from the normal versions of the boss.
Yes,
But-
please.
But as they are right now, the game would be improved if they're removed tomorrow. If a build says it can do Ubers, it should be able to do Ubers. But here's the problem with that. There's very few builds that are truly Uber viable. It's more about Uber viable players.
Players
take
are
some
uber
of the-
viable. Yeah.
Yes. If you take some of Ben's builds and just look at them in POB from races and stuff, you'd say, oh, it's a trash build. That can't do Ubers. Look at that Fizz Max hit. He's just going to get one shot. But he doesn't get hit by the
Doesn't
Fizz.
get hit.
Right. If you're an Uber viable player, you'll have a wide variety of builds that can do Uber bosses. If you are not an Uber viable player, occasionally something will come along like Explodey Totems that can brute force it. And outside of that, it doesn't really matter if it doesn't really matter if a build's Uber viable or not. Ultimately, what matters is, are you Uber viable or not? And it's a good goal to practice the hard thing because it's difficult. It's bad to then blame the build for your own failings because you can dodge. It's really frustrating. Oh, I've gotten very mad at certain Uber bosses when I failed to dodge the same thing 3 times in a row. But I know deep down, I'm just failing to dodge. It's not on the build.
Yeah, that's an expectations issue. I put my foot down hard if somebody asked me the question. I'm sitting here looking at it's like, oh, it's a mirror tier character. It must be uber viable then, right? Automatically, I'm like, no, this character was made for one very specific reason, and Ubers is like the complete opposite of that reason. Do not expect to do Ubers this way. I sure as hell can't do Ubers this way. Maybe if you're the best player in the world, you can, but don't look to me for advice on that. So that's the end of the conversation.
Yeah.
Right
And in
there.
terms of the rest of the expectations, I mean, for a lot of my builds, I make them for myself. If someone else enjoys them, that's great. And if someone else doesn't enjoy them, I'm not really going to change the way I play the game to accommodate someone else with my builds. Maybe you'll like my next one. Maybe you'll like someone else's builds instead.
That is absolutely fair.
I actually hate Ubers, not because they exist, but because they invalidate the running of regular bosses. The moment it was announced that it would work like this, even on the podcast, I was like, this is absolutely stupid because now if you're in a trade league and you can't run an Uber, you shouldn't run a boss. Because it's the same invite and they're valued at the rate of what you will get in an Uber. So if you can't run an Uber, you shouldn't practice the regular boss because you will lose money, and that's silly.
And even worse, unlike at Ziri, a lot of the drops fully carry over. All of the items the normal boss drops, the Uber also drops. At minimum, they should all be like at Ziri, where it's 2 separate loot tables. Because then at least there's a chance that there are desirable things from the normal boss. Like,
but Ziri also has different fragments, which is what fixes it.
Yep, that makes it even better. Although I would argue for some bosses that's not necessary, just because there can be other reasons to run them. And a good example of this used to be Cortex. Not anymore. The whole dropping fractured items is gone. Cortex used to have value before because you'd run it for fractured items even if you weren't doing Uber. Uber Shaper right now. Normal Shaper is not devalued by Uber Shaper existing because the fragments are valuable, and a lot of people can do regular Shaper much faster than they can do Uber. But those are the exceptions. For most bosses, they should just be separate keys, have the keys dropped from the regular boss, separate loot.
Yep.
Yeah, I wonder actually whether with the current implementation that we have of Ubers, whether that was because GGG must be very aware of all those factors that you just brought up, right? That, the access being granted via the same fragment makes it so that obviously it's balanced around the more valuable drops in the economy. And in the same way also that the fact that they share the loot table makes it so people favor the Uber version over the regular because there's no unique selling point for the regular version. It's just straight up worse. And with how versed GGG are at game design, it feels like obviously they're aware of that. Maybe it was really just an experiment of like what happens if we just make it so that there's an on switch and you just press that switch button and then you got access to the Uber version. And maybe they're just, testing out things, as we always theorize they may be. They may be just running big numbers tests on us, and there might be a system around the corner that is less of a placeholder, right? Like, because obviously the current implementation is very easy with the switch via the button. Maybe in the future we'll have a more complicated system for those. I have no idea though. I honestly think this is a sweet spot, and we're already very much over time. So if you guys want to go further over time, we can still talk a little bit about game balance, but I think it's also a great point to hop off here, to round things off, to give people a little bit of an outro and tell them what they can be hyped about when looking at the content. But it's up to you guys. I feel like always people feel like they need to be here until the very end of the episode and would be impolite to leave early. So since I booked the guests for one episode, I don't want to overstay your welcome in my name. Oh god, that was complicated, but you know what I'm getting at. Yeah, how do you guys feel? Do you want to still? Is there still things that you feel strongly about?
I'd say I could go for another
Literally.
20 minutes.
Just kidding.
But that said, don't feel obligated just because I can.
Well, I don't know
Yeah,
how
I'm
much
having
time
fun.
you schedule.
I don't mind either way. This is my first time on here, so I don't have much
Popping his
leverage, I feel.
cherry.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, we'll definitely,
Happy to
obviously,
be
we're
here.
just learning to know you and learning to know the way you think. And we're definitely going to have a follow-up episode in the close future where we discuss things a little bit deeper, because obviously we can't go as deep on every topic as we would like in these episodes, in every single one. But yeah, I was wondering whether you have any pet peeves at all with the game balance. Is there any like outliers where you think it needs adjustments? Moments where you think you died unfairly and there's nothing you could have done within reason in terms of building against it or counterplaying it mechanically?
If we went to the died unfairly part, outside of things that are bugs, known issues, etc., not really. But if we go back to overall game balance of risk and reward, I would say there are some league mechanics that are absolutely not balanced in terms of risk and reward. Essences and beasts are a really good example of this. A beast or an essence monster in tier 16 maps are exponentially more difficult, but not exponentially more rewarding. And I would like to see more content such that as it gets more difficult, it also always gets rewarding, or more rewarding.
My overall principle on balance, some people might want to tune out from this because I've been pretty cordial about it, but so far, but I want a hard game. I want it to be challenging. I want it to be. I remember actually insert Al Kaiser video. I remember he said one time, he said people don't want to play, so they're in high stress mode at all time, literally all times of the day. I remember when he said that, and it made me think quite a bit about it. I was like, yeah, that's right. Even me, somebody who wants the game to be really challenging and stuff, I also don't want to play like I'm on tilt like the whole time. And to that, I was thinking, there's so many different strategies, so many different things you can do. Many of them are easier than others, and you can tailor certain builds towards certain things. But I always keep going back to this idea that Path of Exile is, at its conception, was designed to be the most complicated, complex, convoluted, hardest ARPG game in existence anyway. And so anytime I see somebody complain about this game being too hard, I always think about that. And I'm thinking, why do they want this game to be easier or simpler or something? Sure, we all have a certain threshold, a certain tolerance level for difficulty and complicatedness. I understand that, but my one ace in the hole as an argument is that, look, if you want this game to be easier, play a different game. Like this game was literally designed to be the hardest, most complicated game with the most systems to learn and stuff. I mean, that's a hard talk, I guess, but that's honestly how I feel about it.
There's definitely a point where it gets to that. I think there's a step before that, though, which is play a different build. If you want PoE on easy mode, play Poison SRS, play RF Jug, play the Explodey Poison Totems, the most disgusting OP meta build, and you'll find the game is much easier all of a sudden.
I think this is a misunderstood complaint. I think most of you don't understand the complaint. I don't think the complaint is difficulty the way you're saying difficulty. I think the complaint is difficulty in the way of obfuscation, and I don't think that that's right. And I think it could be improved upon a lot. I don't mind things that are difficult because the content is difficult or because the math is hard. I think the things that are difficult that people complain about are because we don't know what's going on, because the things are obfuscated from us.
Can you give me an example about something specific so I can think on it?
Okay, specific examples would just be so we since now understand, but for a long time didn't. Can you tell me how leech works?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I very much don't want to because it's a long explanation.
I can, and it's a long list. But most people, Tanky will get the right answer, but most people, if they try to explain to you how leech works, are going to get it wrong. Here's another example. Enemies nearby. How far is nearby? Unfortunately, there are three different
the nearby on my stupid.
Is it 4?
Focus. At least 4. It could be that items just have their own random numbers in them.
Yeah, we don't know what nearby is. 4 nearbys. So like occultist nearby is almost a full screen. My nearby on my focus shock mod is like not even like an entire tile in the Elrion hideout. It's less than 12 radius for sure.
Another example is armor. Armor's a really good example. Now, because of Path of Building, we can get a decent understanding of how armor works, but it works at varying levels depending on the fizz hit you get, which is not intuitive. That doesn't make any sense. It's not explained anywhere in the video game. I think the things that people think are too difficult and should be fixed, for the most part, are things that are obfuscated from us. Things that don't work the way that they should or the way that it would make sense. That work in very complicated ways that we have no information on. I think that's the majority of the complaints. Not everyone. Some people will be like, I just want it to be easier. And the answer to those people is play an easier build or go play D3 or go play like some other ARPG that's easier. I mean, which is valid for some people. But
yeah, a good example of someone for whom the answer is definitely go play a different game is I remember having a conversation with someone very insisting that PoE needed to have an auction house. That was the only way the game's economy would function. It doesn't need one. And the fact that we're all here shows that it doesn't function. And if you're dead set on something like that, then yeah, you should probably go play D4 or Last Epoch or any other ARPG out there. There's tons now, and most of them are great. As it turns out, PoE can function without an auction house.
My response, Ballard, to you is again kind of riding on the idea that Path of Exile is by design intended to be this way. It's obvious that they want it to be obfuscated in great deal because they won't tell us what many of these things mean. They won't just come out and straight up say it. I did an entire video last league with the epiphany that Delirium on a map apparently doesn't impact the increased quantity or rarity or increased divination card drop rate of monsters from strong boxes, when I assumed it did for like over a year. And so did everybody else. In fact, it was even written in the wiki that way. And it had to do an enormous turnaround to suddenly make that discovery. But I don't see that as a terrible thing. I don't look back on the entire year and think, oh God, I've been playing wrong the whole time. That's not really the way I feel about it. And I try to think about what, for example, why would I think Path of Exile is a better game than Diablo 3, even in terms of obfuscation? I think there's a lot of merit in the discovery of things that we don't know, and the obfuscation leads to more interesting discoveries, I think. And a bit of a selfish take, but it's obviously works really well for content creators. I know for a fact that trying to make content for Diablo 3 or Diablo 4 is going to be way harder than it is for Path of Exile. It's just there's a rich oasis of content that can be made where we discover new things and test new different things and all different play styles. Not even about making currency or currency strategies, just all kinds of different things. Discovering how the game works when it's changing constantly. And even when I was new at Path of Exile and was at my, shall we say, most frustrated point where I was trying to figure out, oh, so that's how armor works, or oh, so that's how resistances work. It didn't upset me. It was like, oh,
Yeah,
wow, okay. So now I know how to go about it. Now moving forward, I know how to prioritize the stat or just avoid it and do something else. Okay. Oh, the entropy system on evasion.
Like, this is fine, right? Like it's not wrong to approach it the way you're approaching it. Like that's a good answer, and I'm happy with it. And for me personally, I'm actually kind of fine working shit out and finding out discoveries and stuff. Just the important part I wanted to make is most of the time, almost all the time, when you're hearing complaints about how difficult things is, it's not about how difficult it is. It's about how hidden everything is. Like that is the major complaint that most people tend to have.
Yeah, and it's
just
almost like
you're often answering the wrong question, or they're asking the wrong one. But
yeah,
like,
and I think
go ahead.
I think in that case the answer would be, if it is hidden by design, then you either have to accept that as part of a game or play something else. If it's hidden by accident, where even GGG says, oh, yeah, we didn't mean for that to be unclear, then it's a problem that they as the developer should address.
Yeah. That's kind of what I'm trying to say. I feel like it's almost like an Easter egg hunt. And if you want to answer the entire game and you want to know exactly how everything works, I mean, you're going to be on one hell of an Easter egg hunt trying to find the answer to all those things. And that's part of the fun, in my opinion. I mean, I know not everybody feels the same way. I get that. But I'm not I'm not necessarily the typical gamer, and that's okay. I've come to terms with that.
There's a time and place for everything, and I think there's a great place and time for Easter eggs in Path of Exile, or for that sort of content that you do need to feel out, where the game doesn't tell you anything. But I think there's also a lot of places where the game just could tell you a little bit more. Like I guess there's like a distinction to be made between basic information that you need to operate the game in a normal manner, and then like advanced information, like you said, like the aspirational Easter egg hunt, so to say. And obviously the question that needs to be asked there is, where do you draw the line? You know, what do you consider basic information that everyone should have access to in the game without using third party? And then what do you consider like extra stuff that, I mean, it's a knowledge-based game. The part of getting better at Path of Exile, a huge part, in fact, of getting better at Path of Exile is just knowing better what you're dealing with, right? Like knowing better where to invest, knowing like what is the stronger way of scaling a given ability and all that. But I think there's a lot of places where it's needlessly obfuscated, like Balor says. I do think that's not wrong to point out. A great point would be, and that's not something I necessarily agree or where I think the game can do easily improvements, but almost every new player ends up asking for a death log, right? Like most people who die in Path of Exile have almost no idea what they died to, and that's a place where it's really hard to get information. And while that is one where I don't really have a proposal how to change it, because GGG has gone and said that that would take a lot of development resources and would still not be very accurate and helpful to players, so that's fair. But like one example that I have is the defense tab, where it says estimated physical damage reduction and estimated chance to evade attacks, where most people that I talk to about their build, predominantly newer players, will reference those estimated percentage numbers rather than their actual armor or evasion rating, when the actual rating is the useful number and the estimated number is an estimate, but the game doesn't tell you why it's estimated and based on what it is estimated. So, for example, when I first got into Path of Exile and started understanding how these things work, I was wondering, why does my chance to hit go down when my character levels up? That makes no sense. My accuracy didn't reduce, right? Like, why do I have lower chance to hit? And then finding out that, oh, the chance to hit that I see in my character tab is not an actual chance to hit, but it is assuming an evasion rating of a monster based on the level of my character, and therefore that monster has more evasion rating when my character is higher, and then my hit chance goes down. And it's just, like you said, needlessly obfuscated, and there could be some easy things done to make it way more accessible.
So, in theory, I see where you're coming from, but in practice, I would say none of that matters because path of building exists. And if third-party tools are allowed and built into the game and matured to the point where one of the first things a new player is told is get POB, download it right now.
Where in path of building does it show me what nearby is?
It doesn't.
Okay.
But for things like the defenses tab not accurately calculating armor and evasion, or for your accuracy rating, I actually think those things are fine at this point. Now, there's maybe a world in which PoE doesn't have third-party tools. And sure, then maybe there's more of a need for those things to be addressed in game. But when the tools already exist, when the players are already used to using them, I don't think there's much benefit to a developer to fixing the problem.
I'm gonna strongly disagree, because you're right. This doesn't affect us. This doesn't affect existing players. But I guarantee you, people leave in droves that are new. People that never even make it to us. People that never even make it to content creators because they can't figure out what's going on because the information isn't there.
I would follow along with that logic if not for this game being incredibly successful already, and obviously having a proven track record of being successful in the long run. So obviously this by design obfuscation thing, there is something to it, because even though yes, certainly they probably could have gotten more players to come in shorter span if they had made things easier or less complicated stuff. And sure, we can entertain the argument as to whether or not that would have been a better outcome overall. But I do find it somewhat invigorating that this game is the way it is, and it's obviously challenging on a multitude of levels, and yet it's still very successful, surprisingly, even though some people would think that, if you looked from the outside in, you'd be like, there's no way in hell this game would take off like this. It can't possibly happen. But clearly, there's an audience for it.
Also, anecdotal evidence. A lot of the things that a veteran might think is a new player hang up, a new player isn't even thinking about.
But they're not supposed to think about it anyway.
Yeah. That I think you're, out of everyone here, the best able to empathize with the thought process of a new player. But sure. I also have a couple of real life friends who played casually, and I guarantee you none of them have ever thought about what nearby is. They just
I don't think I even downloaded POB until literally like weeks after I started playing, maybe a month or two. And I don't remember exactly, but it definitely wasn't right off the bat.
Yeah,
it didn't need to be.
Yep. And for something like nearby, they just assume that as long as I'm within range to hit the enemy, it probably works, which in some cases is absolutely correct, and in other cases isn't. And none of them have done anything that has changed or challenged that assumption yet.
I mean, it's getting a little off track anyway. Like none of this is I don't have any problem with any of these things. I'm fine with
none of these things were what I was aiming for with the question anyway. We went in a completely different direction, but that's okay. I mean, I want to talk about the things that you want to talk about, and it was very insightful, I think. But yeah, I also think we went super long, and if we do a good outro round now, then we can conclude before 3 hours, and that would be amazing, because then we can leave on a high note where everyone is like, hey, we want more, we're not done yet. So then everyone is eager to come back for the next one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I swear, I'm not. People said I'm awkward in chat. People said this is the most awkward podcast ever. I'm not that awkward. I just didn't sleep. I sacrificed a lot to make this episode happen, and I don't know enough about the time restraints of the other people. I know Balor did interrupt the middle of his stream to just come onto this podcast. I know Tanky is probably staying up late, and Snoobay got early off of work, and so I just wanted to, even though I think I know it might have been awkward to ask whether we want to continue or whether we want to do another round of topic discussion. But I just think it's important to make sure that all my guests are happy with the episode, because I wouldn't want to burn you on the first episode that you come on, Snoop.
No, I'm good. I'm good. I'm enduring it surprisingly well. Yeah, 3 hours, I guess, is a long time. So I'm starting to feel it a little bit.
I'm always very excited to have these, and I have to say, even after doing more than 100, it always, I look at the timer and I'm like, what? Already 3 hours? Where'd the time go? But
You're the guy who does 24-hour podcasts. You kidding me? I can't
Yeah,
even fathom that. How you managed to do that? No way I could have ever done that.
I can't even fathom how streamers stream for 12 hours in a day, personally.
Yeah.
it does help to have a lot of different guests who cover most of the talking time. I don't know how it would go if I did a 24-hour solo podcast. That'd be interesting. And that would be way more descending into madness than the actual 24-hour cast was. But yeah, people have said in the chat that they appreciate the different takes, and one specific comment was, at the end of the show, I'd like to know where to find all of the members. I've especially enjoyed this episode and want to make sure I follow everyone, especially on Discord. So yeah, this is you answering that question. Snoobe, where can people
Okay.
find you? What can we be hyped about?
As far as the title, Snoobe85 is going to be my handle for YouTube and Twitch. Those are the only two things that I'm really invested in, as well as Discord, though. But you can find the Discord through one of those two things. So if you follow me there, you can find the Discord very easily that way. Come along by, and you're going to be in a nice community that typically doesn't bash the game for being that one way or another. Surprisingly nice community. My community was pulling me to make a Discord channel for some time. I did it quite late into my content creator career, if you will, and it just absolutely took off to the moon. I can't believe how well it was during Calandra League, so that's when everybody stopped watching everyone else, and I got all the people that league.
Yep.
And we've just been continuing with it for a couple of leagues straight. So there's a lot left to discover in this game, and I'm always testing different things. New players welcome, but beware. A lot of my content is not really designed for new players, which I guess makes me a little different than most content creators who typically are trying very hard to create content for the new player. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I prefer to play the game the way I want to, and I make content for somebody like myself. And I'm just lucky that there are actually a lot of people like me out there. That's it.
Yeah. That's great. I'm definitely gonna. I mean, I checked out a little bit to make sure that I'm familiar with what you do on your streams and all that. And I've seen you here and there on the GFL, but I'm definitely gonna listen in a lot more now that I know the context of your opinions. And
If you follow me, you will find a Mage Blood tomorrow.
I'm sold right now. Never had a Mage Blood. Let's go. Tanky, what are some projects that you currently involve yourself with, and what should people be excited to see on your streams and where?
You'll be able to find me here on YouTube, same name as I use everywhere else, although I do have a second channel, 10 Gaming Thoughts, talks about things outside of the ARPG space, some gaming news, more traditional RPGs, that kind of thing. Occasionally, you may also find me on Twitch. And if you like written content, you'll find my guides over at Maxwell GG, where I'm wrapping up the Meta Report series with something that should be out very soon.
Sounds good. Before I give the word to Ballard to give a short outro shout out, I want to point out that, of course, you guys do not have to memorize how to type out the names in chat or in your browser bar, rather, but you can actually I linked all the creators in the titles, usually, as long as there's YouTube channels for the creators, they're linked in the title of the podcast. So you can literally click them and you directly get to the YouTube channels of the guest creators. I hope that helps a little bit. Obviously, if you're listening from YouTube or from Spotify or one of the many other platforms, you're gonna have to use Google or get to the YouTube somehow. But it's always worth going to the YouTube so you can support the creation of the show by leaving a like and a comment, obviously. So, Valor, what can we be excited to see you do in SSF? What are the next thresholds to overcome?
I have no idea. I'm not super experienced in SSF. All I know is I want to kill at least one Uber because I've never done that. But we're only a few weeks away from D4, which I'm going to heavily do. Was one thing I do want to tell everyone as many times as I can before next league is I'm doing something real different next league. I'm starting in a private league. It'll be open to chat. I'm doing like a smaller chat SF style league, so anybody can join. And also, that's going to be weird for me because my normal thing is very much, hey, that first like 3 to 5 days, get rich as everything on softcore trade. Like it's all currency generation. Is literally my specialty is make money in the first 3 to 5 days. Like that carries my entire league, and I'm going from that to like a small softcore private league start next league. So that's going to be very weird, very different. I have absolutely no idea how it'll go, but it is open to everyone. So
you're 100% committed to that? No chance you're going to change your mind based on the announcement?
There would have to be something that looks even better than Sentinel for trade league mapping for me to go back on it. It would have to be even better than Sentinel, and we haven't seen anything better than Sentinel for mapping, so I doubt it. I'm 99% sure.
To be honest, no one knew how good Sentinel was going to be for mapping prior to the actual league, right? We all didn't expect it to be as blasty as it was. It actually was kind of surprising how much it leaned into zoominess.
Until you got too blasty, and then it was terrible again.
And you got blasted back.
Yes, I learned if you keep min-maxing your build, you'll actually kill all the monsters before the robot gets to do anything.
Oh yeah, that was I remember that. Yeah, we talked about that here. Yeah, so as for myself, I'm still on the animate weapon guardian, not leveling anymore because I struggle to fit suppression into the build, and that just means I die randomly because I'm not a perfect player. Definitely a skill issue though, because I learned that I can play deathless if I just do the right movement patterns and pay attention all the time. I just somehow always get distracted and fall into a comfort zone. But yeah, today 6 linked some chess pieces, double corrupted them, actually got a +2 that I'm using now, so that's great. Finally get that level 25 it is, where you get the 17th weapon. And yeah, just cruising and having a lot of fun thinking about the next build. I'm still thinking maybe I'll try Charge Dash, probably not. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of things I just need to start POB in, because like we said earlier, would be great to start the build knowing that it's worth it. And
I think for me personally, I'm not sure what I'm going to do next in PoE, but definitely looking forward to all the games coming out. Torchlight Infinite's releasing a small indie ARPG called Ghost Lores coming out on, I think, the 18th. Last Epoch's getting a patch on the 25th. D4 in June. If anything, there's not enough hours in the day to play all the games coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you should make like a little ARPG calendar, JPEG or something like that, overview for all this stuff that you just mentioned, and post it on Twitter for the big repost farms. Would be nice to have it all neatly written down. I'm too lazy to look up all those dates. But yeah, definitely LE, big game. If you haven't tried that, I'm recommending that warmly. Definitely worth a couple of hours to sink into, because it's so different from PoE, refreshingly different. It seems like on every fork in the road where the developers could have been like, hey, do we do this like PoE or do we do it differently? They purposefully went with the contrarian take. It's like we'd want to do it different than PoE. Yeah. So a lot of interesting stuff to explore in that game. Lovely.
Yeah. Ghost Lore is also very different from PoE, though you can get pretty zoomy in endgame, but it's much simpler game made by just a couple of devs. Originally, very cool story behind it. The main dev, Andrew, was going to make the game with RPG Maker and release it completely for free. And he met a programmer who was like, no, we can actually make something out of your idea. And now it's a game that's going to be releasing on Steam, which is just a really cool story.
Awesome. Yeah, you got to send me more information about that. I'm curious now. I've recently been looking into expanding my horizons.
All right.
But yeah. I just want to, I guess, before I forget, thank you both for coming onto the podcast and bringing valuable points. I've seen people going like, this has been my favorite episode of FATED. Some people definitely
always say that.
Yeah, true. There's always the one person
Maybe it's
that
a
is like,
different set
that
of
was the
people
best
every
one."
time, though.
Probably is.
It'd be funnier if
should
it's
watch
the
all of
same
these, by
person
the
every
way.
time just to hype us up.
I want to say thank you to Capmaster too. Thank you for making the Faded podcast, not just for me, but truth be told, I don't watch every single ounce of PoE content out there. I'm pretty selective about what content I watch, but this is one of those things that I look forward to, actually, as a listener and enjoyer of the podcast. So, yeah, I guess it's an honor to actually be on it, and I hope you do have me again.
Well, that is very charming, and I appreciate all the positive feedback that people give me, despite my overwhelming awkwardness after 20 hours of no sleep.
I didn't
But-
actually watch all of the 24-hour one, though.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
didn't watch all
good,
of that.
good. That's keep that for when you're really drunk on New Year's Eve and you don't know what else to
yeah.
do after you come home
Okay.
after the fireworks or something like that. Anyway, thanks for coming on. It was great to have you, and soon again. There's more episodes surely coming. We're gonna wind down a little bit as next week's gonna be BPL, so I don't know how many episodes we're gonna be doing per week. This also concludes the first month of the podcast. We did the first month 2 episodes per week, and probably gonna slow down the schedule a little bit in the coming month. But then as we go into ExileCon, there's probably gonna be multiple podcasts during that event covering all the news posts that we get, and maybe we can persuade Balor Mage into making another phone appearance from ExileCon.
I'll have a slightly better microphone and a shit laptop. I'll be able to do some things from ExileCon.
Awesome, looking forward to that. And yeah, until then, guys, definitely check out these amazing broadcasters. Click the links in the YouTube title and in the description. And we'll see you for the next episode somewhere. Look out, keep refreshing that fated.fyi/next hyperlink until I actually added the new countdown for the next episode. But it will be probably somewhere in the next 10 days, I would bet. No idea. I'm talking to people. We'll see. Wonderful day. Goodbye, everyone. This is the outro music, and don't forget to rate it up and give us all the engagement that you think this podcast deserves. And we'll see you for the next episode. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
This is
Thanks
the
for
outro
having me.
music.